people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist? You're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs? Fuck you. War.
He's immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War.
This is the end game.
All right, it is Friday, February 14th, 2025, the 26th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I know you're feeling the love, just like I am. Always, always feeling that love, especially true when we get to celebrate Saint Valentine or whatever. I have no idea why this is a day, but I guess that we're all just running around like little cherubs, shooting one another with tiny bows and arrows, making people fall in love who wouldn't otherwise or something. No idea. Wanted to let everybody know, cancelcodetour.com or cancelcodetour.myspreadshot.com. I put the logo gear up yesterday, and I have some more merch hopefully coming this weekend. I'm trying to get a good grovel out there. And I've been working on my grovel graphic with the assistance of various robots and machines and intelligences from other realms. I haven't gotten it exactly where I want it yet, but soon, I think it's close. And I think that I may well do merch for this meme that I finally got where I wanted last night. This is over on Truth Social. It was the smartest of times. It was the retardest of times. And man, I really like that graphic. It just cracks me up. I don't know. It's like the opt-out ghost. Like when you get it, or maybe it's just me, but I mean, I giggle when this stuff works out the way I want it to finally, after many years of struggling, trying to chip it out of a rock wall down in the mine. I finally emerge with something that ChatGPT has created for me. ChatGPT actually did that one. Usually that's not my graphic AI of choice. I usually use Midjourney or Canva. I'm pretty retarded at all of these AIs. I just keep asking it questions and talking to the machine until it does the thing I want it to do. And the problem with the AIs that I use, or at least how I use them, is that I can't really control them down to the minute things. So I'll have to like take something like this and then add pieces to it to finally make it whole. But the tired ghost on the couch, the AI nailed that one. Very pleased with it. All right, so let's get into some of the happenings of the 48 hours we have been apart. Yesterday, Donald Trump welcomed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to the White House. And as we'll see a little later, he welcomed the leader of India, Narendra Modi, to the White House as well. But here is RFK Jr., just a bit of his, I don't know what you would call it, acceptance speech. Donald Trump asked him to say a few words in the Oval Office after he was sworn in. RFK Jr. chose Justice Neil Gorsuch to do the swearing in. And that was kind of an interesting moment between Trump and Kennedy and Gorsuch, because Trump didn't know who invited Gorsuch. And Kennedy then said, it was actually me. I'm the one who invited Neil Gorsuch to do this swearing in. And that's great. And it's interesting as well, because Kennedy, of course, is a lifelong Democrat. But consider who the Democrats have in the Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson, barely worth mentioning. She was nominated by a fake president and then confirmed by a Senate that is totally incapable of proving its own legitimacy. So her standing in the Supreme Court is a bit absurd. And then you've got the two Obama appointees, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. And honestly, come on. So it's hard to take any of those people seriously. Kennedy chose Neil Gorsuch, and here is Kennedy.
A quote from Emerson where he said, if a single man plant himself firmly on his own ideal and there abide, the whole wide world will come round to him. For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. And he gave me he's now given me, he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word in every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust President Trump, that I better get it in writing. And we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. And I'm so grateful to him. And I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country at a time when we see all of the indicia of democracy now in tatters in our country. We see the rise of the military-industrial complex, the rise of totalitarianism, these attacks on our Constitution, and this breathtaking epidemic that is disabling our people. President Trump has promised to restore the American dream in this country. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person only has one. 60% of our population has only one dream, that they get better.
All right. So a very gracious speech by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I guess he's getting right to work. That is the expectation, of course. And regardless of what he's doing, Donald Trump got right on it yesterday. Here is, he put out an executive order establishing the president's Make America Healthy Again Commission. And he went through a number of these statistics, that one of which was the one you just heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. mention, talking about the health crisis in America. And as you go through these statistics, or at least as I went through these statistics yesterday, I was struck by the fact that we're told we're the most powerful country that's ever existed in the history of the world. We are the richest country that has ever existed in the history of the world. We are the richest country now. And yet our people are chronically ill, chronically overweight, rampant mental health problems, that's an indication that by and large, we are some kind of slave state. That should not be happening in a state where the people are free and independent, and we also enjoy such prosperity. The prosperity is either an illusion or it's possessed by so few people that everyone else is being destroyed. Just wanted to go through just a bit of this. To fully address the growing health crisis in America, we must redirect our national focus in the public and private sectors toward understanding and drastically lowering chronic disease rates and ending childhood chronic diseases. This includes fresh thinking on nutrition, physical activity, health lifestyles, over-reliance on medication and treatments, the effects of new technological habits, environmental impacts, and food and drug quality and safety. We must restore the integrity of the scientific process by protecting expert recommendations from inappropriate influence and increasing transparency regarding existing data. We must ensure our health system promotes health rather than just managing disease. And Kennedy went through and backed up many of those statements yesterday. This is Donald Trump today. This is one of those times where this is a reprint from the Washington Examiner, or maybe the Denver Gazette is just in the same media family or conglomerate. But the headline is Trump signing executive order to abolish COVID-19 vaccine mandates in schools. According to the White House, the move fulfills another of Trump's campaign promises and solidifies the president as, quote, a staunch advocate for parental rights, ensuring families have the primary role in shaping their children's educational journey free from undue bureaucratic mandates. The order will bar federal funds, quote, from being used to support or subsidize an educational service agency, state education agency, local education agency, elementary school, secondary school, or institution of higher education that requires students to have received a COVID-19 vaccination to attend in-person education programs. Trump's order also directs the Secretaries of Education and Health and Human Services to provide the White House with a comprehensive plan to, quote, end coercive COVID-19 vaccine mandates, including a report on non-compliant entities and a process for preventing federal funds from supporting educational entities that impose COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Okay. Goes through a little bit with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Linda McMahon. As we have gone over a couple of times in the last week or so on this show, Trump has said himself that Linda McMahon is being brought into the Department of Education, brought in to run the Department of Education in order to essentially close up shop. She's going to come in. Whatever information needs gathered and exposed to the public, we can assume she's going to do that, and then she will oversee the dismantling and elimination of that department. The same should be true of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when it comes to Health and Human Services. There should not be a Department of Health and Human Services in a federal government of a free country with free people in a constitutional republic. If there is any role for government in that at all, and I don't believe there is, but if there were to be, it certainly would not be at the federal level overseeing and making rules for a nation of 250 million plus people. We're told it's like 340 million, but that is according to the census. The census measures not only American citizens, but just people in the country. We are consistently told that there are around 11 million illegal aliens here, but that is obviously not true. If we had a population of about 250 million in this country 30 years ago, and the American population, the native population, has declining birth rates across the board, we've been told for decades that that's true, then there's absolutely no way to see our population increase by 40% in 30 years when the number of illegal aliens has remained the same. And of course, who knows what the impact of illegal aliens having children in this country might be. One of these days, all of that will get hashed out. Donald Trump has given indications that he knows those numbers to be false and says that maybe one day we will have some correct answers on that. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, who knows? So the departments themselves are going to have to be eliminated, but for now, we are going to have them implement this elimination of federal funds if these schools, universities, etc., have COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Donald Trump, as Brian and I discussed, actually, with no knowledge of this executive order coming out today, we discussed on Badlands Daily this morning, Trump has promised for years that federal funding would be eliminated for any schools or universities implementing vaccine mandates or mask mandates. And it wasn't just about COVID-19, it was across the board. And so I would assume that this is a widespread, culturally accepted first step. Okay, people have kind of come to terms with the fact that the COVID-19 vaccines didn't work, may well be toxic, and that COVID-19 wasn't actually a deadly disease in the first place. There was no very deadly pandemic. And if people still believe that there was, I would suggest that you probably haven't thought it through all the way, or perhaps you just have an aversion to letting things like that go based on how much the very deadly pandemic narrative affected all of our lives and affected our decisions. And some people made decisions during that time that they probably would like to take back, or at least, get a mulligan on. And accepting that there was no disease in the first place is kind of an emotional journey that many people still aren't willing to take, unfortunately. Sooner or later, it's going to have to be done. Regardless, this seems like a first step. It's implemented on the very next day after the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as HHS Secretary story kind of comes to fruition in full. Now he's just the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I guess there's going to be some agenda that he's going to go into that body and implement. Hopefully it's along the lines of what Elon Musk is doing with Doge across the federal government. And hopefully within these departments, the people nominated and now confirmed for the most part as secretaries will take charge and take the lead on exposing to the public exactly what those departments have been doing. Maybe it's not just that Doge is going to do that across the board, and that's probably right. Might as well have someone right in there on the ground, able to communicate these things to the public. And we've discussed many times over the past few months the potential that all of these nominations for and from the fantasy team are primarily going to be used as communicators to the general public. So hopefully this will be the first step in eliminating the childhood vaccine schedule. If the federal funding goes away from these schools and universities based on the vaccine schedule, then they have to choose one or the other. Are they going to hold out and say these vaccines really do save children's lives? We're going to lose herd immunity if the vaccine schedule is not in place anymore? Are they going to stick to that? Or are they going to take the money and shut up? And I would suggest that they're probably going to take the money and shut up. And hopefully, as the Department of Education is eliminated, the federal funding for schools and universities is eliminated anyway. Maybe there will be some pushback regarding the vaccine schedule, and it could create additional public outcry and public motivation to separate the federal government from schools and universities altogether. That's where everything should be going and needs to be going. And on some level, that's what Donald Trump has promised. I think it's up to the American people to make sure that all that stuff actually happens. All right, let me have a look in with the chat. We'll take a momentary break. Snowcat operator just dropping subscriptions on people again. Thank you very much, my friend. And let us continue Yesterday was also the executive order signing day for reciprocal trade. Let me see if I can talk. Let us hear Donald Trump address this issue from the Oval Office yesterday.
Actually, tariffs are good.
And by the way, how great is it that he has that map behind him? His head is blocking it from this view and his shoulder, but that's the Gulf of America that he's advertising just behind himself. Gotta love it.
Tariffs are great, actually. And the problem is we didn't charge them and everyone else did. They charged us, but we didn't charge them because we were generous or foolish or stupid or all of the above. So this is one of the biggest, I think, economic bills ever signed. I think it's probably the biggest in terms of what it represents. Now, this doesn't include what we did a few days ago with steel and aluminum. That's over and above this. Cars will be over and above this. Look at what's coming shortly. If you take a look at the chips and the various things in that world, that universe, that'll be over and above. Also, pharmaceuticals will be over and above. So those elements will be over and above. Otherwise, this is covering pretty much everything. And it's going to be great for the United States and fair for the world. I mean, it's the most fair you can do. We could charge just a flat tariff, and that would be in many ways easier, but you could make a case that that wouldn't be fair to other countries. This is fair. Remember, whatever they charge, we charge. Or whatever they charge us, we charge them. And if they charge us nothing, we charge them nothing. And it really works out well. And we'd be very happy to have nothing and nothing. We wouldn't have any tariffs at all. But to me, it's something that I'm very proudly doing. It should have been done many, many years ago. And we're doing it now. We're doing it very late because we were very foolish, as a country, very foolish. And we're doing it now.
And then he gives the most interesting signature that I've ever seen by far. What a crazy signature he has. One day, I hope we can just unlock all of these many secrets. Okay, so reciprocal trade as an aspect of a global economy is in direct conflict with the global regime's economic plans. A top-down planned economy is not possible with what Trump has been doing. And we're going to probably come back to this theme multiple times today. We've gone over again and again over the last, I don't know, however many months, these regime tactics on how they are able to control nations, to overthrow governments, to infiltrate, and then to control nations. And a lot of this became very clear to me while reading the transfer agreement last year, the agreement between Zionists and Nazis in 1933. The leverage being used was the boycott and the reports of atrocities in Germany. And there was the leverage was all to complete a business partnership between Zionists and Nazis to transport the Jews of Europe down to Palestine to set up the global regime's proxy state of Israel. And the leverage points were clear. You would start, because of the control of global media, you would start with various stories to leverage governments, corporations, whatever. You can control the reputations of any individual or corporation or government that needs to be targeted. Create these stories, change public sentiment and public opinion, and potentially put people out of jobs, destroy their reputations in society, destroy businesses, shut them down. Most people, that's all you need to do. You threaten that stuff. People don't want to deal with it. They don't want their good name dragged through the mud. And so they'll go along with it, especially if it's not something that they're passionate about or something that they have a whole lot of principled beliefs about. If that doesn't work, you move up to the economic control because, of course, you control international finance, banking, currencies. You're able to levy sanctions. And so that's the next level of control. If you control trade routes and resources, you can shut down countries' entire economies or eliminate their ability to get certain necessary supplies, food, machinery, whatever it might be. And then finally, you have control over militaries. And again, we're probably going to talk about most of this today. All of those are control mechanisms that can be used from the top down if you have full control on a global governance level. And that's the level at which the global government had full control. The United States was always the heavy in that situation. U.S. economy, U.S. labor, U.S. resources, U.S. control over transport routes, and of course, Team America World Police. We're going to come back to all of that. The tariff structure, the way they had it, all that top-down, globally planned economy, that's why the U.S. had all these tariff policies. Trump is eliminating that. If a country wants to tariff us, we'll tariff them right back. If they're not tariffing us, then we're not going to tariff them. And then what you have is actual free trade and fair trade. That's what we are told is the ideal situation, but it never worked out that way, at least not for the United States. It worked out that way just fine for these other countries. They would get more from us than we would get from them. And that empowered and strengthened them. That was undue influence. That's not a free market. So it's not free trade. It's manipulated trade in manipulated markets. Here is the fact sheet from the White House yesterday that accompanied Donald Trump's executive order. President Donald J. Trump announces fair and reciprocal plan on trade. The fair and reciprocal plan will seek to correct long-standing imbalances in international trade and ensure fairness across the board. Gone are the days of America being taken advantage of. This plan will put the American worker first, improve our competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our trade deficit, and bolster our economic and national security. The United States is one of the most open economies in the world, yet our trading partners keep their markets closed to our exports. This lack of reciprocity is unfair and contributes to our large and persistent annual trade deficit. You can go through and see the examples of countries charging us high tariffs, us not charging any tariffs or very low tariffs, and how over time that creates an imbalance. President Trump continues to deliver on his mandate given to him by the American people to put America first when it comes to trade. And again, the mandate is mentioned. That's what Donald Trump has, a mandate from the American people, totally unrelated to our fake elections. We went through that. You know what? I'm just going to pull this up again because I don't assume that everybody watches or listens to every episode of my show. Let's pause that for just a moment and recall what Donald Trump said to Brett Baer just this week.
There's always been something that Americans rally around to come together. They really do. You won the popular vote. You won all the swing states. But still, Kamala Harris got 75 million votes in the country.
Well, if you believe the whole thing.
Okay. Let's just say
it is ridiculous.
That the election was as it was.
Excuse me. There's
Brett Baer suggests that Kamala received 75 million votes, and Donald Trump said, well, okay, if you believe the whole thing, but the whole thing is ridiculous, mocking the idea that the election results of 2024 could be believed as though they accurately represented the will and intent of the American voter. They didn't, obviously. Trump knows that, obviously. He's making it clear right there. Now, I talked about that for a year because the election is only a narrative event. If elections are real, if only real, lawful American votes are counted and the results accurately reflect the will and intent of the American voter, then the election result would reflect victory in a battle of narratives. And if the election results are fake, if the elections themselves are fake, and they are, then all you have is a battle of narratives to begin with. Donald Trump won that battle of narratives. Donald Trump won that battle of narratives in 2020 and has won it at every point since. There might have been a little speed bump there from about January 6th of 2021 to maybe a few months after that. Once people really got a view of what life would be like under a fake and illegitimate Biden regime, it became clear that, oh man, maybe we shouldn't have defended the reality of that fake election. The election was always fake. Had we understood that leading up to the election and been loud and vocal about that with our peers, understanding that we all agree Donald Trump must lead the country forward, not Joe Biden, not Kamala. It was a fake campaign leading up to a fake election. If we all really owned that in advance, then perhaps we could have moved forward to a different level. Maybe the media wouldn't have been able to keep telling us, oh, this election's coming. You better get out there and vote as hard as you can. Maybe we would have gone beyond that and made the media and the central narrative adjust to the new reality, the new collective understanding among the American people, that all that was necessary was for Donald Trump to receive a public mandate. It was not actually necessary to have the television tell us that he won a fake election. And now he's telling us that the election was fake. So at all times, all that mattered was the public mandate. And if Trump ever lost the public mandate, then that would essentially be, and should be, the end of his presidency. It's that simple. If the people don't want you to rule, then the people have the right at all times to pull back the authority that they have delegated to you. And that goes for the president, for the Congress, for the Senate, goes for your governor, goes for your state legislature, people at a county level, people at a local level, city level, whatever it is. The people delegate their power to the local government, the state government, and ultimately the federal government. And they retain the power to withdraw that delegation at any time. So Donald Trump has the mandate of the American people. As President Trump said in the presidential memorandum on America First trade policy on his first day in office, trade policy is a critical component of our economic security and national security. And mentioning that, Peter Navarro was in the Oval Office yesterday. You might have seen him at the beginning of that last clip. Peter Navarro seems like a wonderful man. And my good friend, Garrett Ziegler, was working with him in the first term. If you're relatively new to this show, go back and listen to my episodes with Garrett. Some really interesting interviews there. But let's continue with the reciprocal trade policy put forward yesterday. In his first term, President Trump successfully ended the outdated and unfair NAFTA, replacing it with the historic USMCA to deliver one of the largest wins for American workers. And it's probably worth mentioning the context of that. If you're not familiar with Garrett Ziegler, he is the main man behind the Marco Polo research group who did the report on the Biden laptop. When our national security was threatened by a global oversupply of steel and aluminum, President Trump took swift action to protect America's national security by implementing tariffs on imports of these goods. In response to China's intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, and other unreasonable behavior, President Trump acted with conviction to impose tariffs on imports from China, using that leverage to reach and historic bilateral economic agreement. Just last week, President Trump leveraged tariffs to force Canada and Mexico to make long overdue changes at our northern and southern borders, ensuring the safety and security of American citizens. That's right. Trump got Mexico and Canada to pay for it. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Donald Trump, as we will get to in just a second, also, as I said, met with Narendra Modi yesterday. And in their press conference, Trump mentioned reciprocal trade with Modi, said when India tariffs us, we will tariff India. There's nothing underhanded about this. It's not aggressive. It's not going to threaten our relationships with these other countries, although we will probably be told that it threatens our relationships with these European nations, because that's what it always has to be. Donald Trump is the bad guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. And these America First policies actually aren't America First. They're just going to hurt us. No, they won't. No, they won't. Maybe there will be some downside effect at first, but that will go away quickly. And it's my belief that a lot of that downside effect was experienced in 2020 and 2021. The cover story was the very deadly pandemic and the stolen election and the fake presidency of one Joseph Robinette Biden, also known affectionately as our boy Blue. Donald Trump yesterday talked about our boy True.
Ongoing with Canada, there was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there, and you know, people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection, yes.
It's a different world. You got to love how he says Governor Trudeau just casually now. It's not a joke. It's not shocking. Just calls him governor. Why? Probably because Canada's not a real country. It's what it sounds like. And, you know, the history on that stuff, you can go back through it, and there's questionable elements to a lot of what we've been told about where the borders of nations, the lines on the maps are drawn. It's true in Europe. It's true in Asia. It's true in North America. It's crazy to think, because we've always just been like, oh, yeah, Canada's that foreign country to the north. Is it? I guess we'll see. Regardless, the United States of America and its Navy are going to be protecting the waters all the way around North America, from the North Pole all the way down to Panama. Doesn't Van Halen have a Panama song? Van Halen just like writes songs about places. Don't they? I think they have a New York, Panama, Amsterdam. They're like no inspiration whatsoever. Just write a song where you just scream the name of a place. Everybody there buys your album. Ah, yeah, finally, someone made a song about Panama. Gotta love it. Okay, let's continue from the very interesting Oval Office session yesterday. And it's like every time I do one of these shows, Trump's doing an interesting Oval Office session. I don't think he is right now. If he is, you can tell me in the chat. Maybe we'll go watch it live for a minute. Everything he does at this point in the Oval Office sessions is so interesting. And, you know, you guys know that I'm crazy or whatever, conspiracy theorist, blah, blah, blah. I look at Donald Trump and his direct communications with the American people as the political reality in our country. Trump is telling us what's going on. Everything that we see with the fantasy team, with these ancillary characters like JD Vance, the non-successor over in Europe. Oh, he's giving a speech. Oh, he's holding a meeting. Oh, look at that. He's holding a meeting with a comedic actor. They're doing negotiations. All that's nonsense. Trump will tell you what's going on. And usually what Trump is telling us preempts something that'll happen on that secondary layer. Why is that? It's my theory that the secondary layer would be playing out as it is, regardless of whether or not Trump was there. And we're going to get into a little bit of that in a few minutes. And I know that that's a lot for people to deal with, and I understand. I think that over time, which is why I keep pointing it out, over time, I think that these things become more easily visible. And, some people just continue thinking I'm crazy, and that's all good. This is the direct layer. This is the direct path communication from Donald Trump to the American people. And what we are told about these staged events around the world. And when JD flies down to Virginia or whatever else, all of that is just a scripted secondary layer that would probably be playing out regardless of where Donald Trump was. If Ron DeSantis was the president and JD Vance was the vice president right now, which I think there's a pretty good chance that that would be how it is, or maybe Nikki Haley or maybe someone else, that layer would be playing out exactly the same. Donald Trump is the disruption to the global regime's script, okay? The Great Reset agenda, the 2030 agenda, all of that is a long-term scripted agenda with a whole bunch of waypoints that are going to be matched by the competing agenda. They have a plan, we have a plan. The truth is they have not only that main plan and the plan they communicate to the general public, there are probably a lot of sub-plans underneath that because there are various factions and various interests that all need to be taken care of. And sometimes there is a competition going on in there. Not to spend too much time going back to the Nazis and the transfer agreement and all that. But one of the key aspects of that book, the transfer agreement, is that the Jewish governing bodies, and it's not me saying that, it's Jewish Congresses, there were multiple of them. The transfer agreement is about the horse race between these various Jewish and Zionist governance bodies trying to figure out who would get to land the profitable side of the business deal, the partnership with the Nazis. That's what the book is about. And it's extraordinarily well evidenced. It is heavily awarded. It's in its third edition. And the person who wrote the epilogue for this edition, the third edition, the one I read, I think it came out like 15 years ago, was the former head of the ADL. So I'm presenting it, I believe, authentically and honestly. I think I'm representing it as it represents itself. Can't be anti-Semitic. Just so happens that, according to the author Edwin Black, this is exactly what occurred. But the point is that even within these global governing bodies, they have their own factions competing with one another, trying to destroy one another in the same way that they destroy nations and governments and corporations and individuals. Assassinations, they went that far even. And so there are always going to be sub-plans even underneath the regime's plan, but it's important to understand that there is a plan, and it's a long-term plan, not just something they come up with in their daily meetings at CNN or the New York Times or wherever else. These are things that are kind of set in place for a long time. And so if the uniparty left and its media have plans and the global regime has a plan, all executed through their medias, well, the uniparty right, their controlled opposition, they have plans too. They had candidates that they were pushing forward. They didn't want Donald Trump coming back. And so there are these other candidates, these other rising stars. And I think what we're seeing right now, actually, is Donald Trump eliminating the rising stars on both sides. And I got into that a little bit on, what was it, Wednesday. Always something to keep in mind as we view these things. So Donald Trump was asked yesterday about what the new reality as far as taxes is going to look like. And the IRS, here we have that.
arrived today, Gavin Clagger and others arrived today at the IRS. Do you expect to close the IRS, or what are you expecting?
No, I don't expect it, but I think that the Internal Revenue Service will be looked at like everybody else. Just about everybody's going to be looked at. So it's they're doing a hell of a job. It's an amazing job they're doing. And you know, that force is building. I call it the force of super geniuses, but it's building. And you know, they go up and they talk to some of the people about certain deals, and the people get all tongue-tied. They can't talk because these people get it. They're very smart people. We need smart people. Yes.
So he's addressing the Doge crew going into the IRS. I joked yesterday, I think it was yesterday, on Truth Social and Telegram about being concerned that some hostile actors are going to have all this access to our personal and financial information. Like, oh no, we would never want Elon Musk and Donald Trump to have access to that information. We have to leave it at the IRS, that foreign organization that we just know we can trust so much. Like, not even a legitimate part of the American government. By the way, something really interesting. Alex Jones, who, you know, I don't have much in the way of respect or admiration for. I kind of think he's a bit of a clown. Yes, I know that he's been way ahead of many people many times, but right now I'm not even sure that the character Alex Jones exists. And maybe I can find this and pull it up. Hold for processing just a second. So there are those who believe that Alex Jones is just the comedian Bill Hicks, who was, what they say, unalived. Bill Hicks disappeared from the world far too soon. And there are those who believe that he simply became Alex Jones. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. But, gosh, why can't I find this? I would really like to find this. Oh! So, Alex Jones yesterday put up some clip where he was discussing taxes and the IRS. And he said that the IRS was going to be nationalized, which essentially means bringing it back under the government. Same thing with the Fed, of course, because they're basically partner organizations. The IRS is the bagman for the Federal Reserve. They collect the rental fees on the fiat currency that the Federal Reserve lets us use on behalf of the global banking regime. So they print the money, their fiat currency, that they can print more of at any time, thus causing inflation. And they rent it to us, and then we pay a tax, which is a rental fee, to use their worthless fiat currency, and that is collected by the IRS. And so if those are being nationalized, they're being brought back under the American federal government. And Joe Lang has been talking about this for 5 years. The funny thing is, Alex Jones yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, was saying, you heard it here first. Well, no, we didn't. We've been talking about that now for years. And we didn't hear it first from Alex Jones by any stretch of the imagination. And other people wouldn't have heard it first from Alex Jones either, except for the fact that all of us are censored and have been for a really, really long time. I would love to find this link, and I'm not finding it. I wonder where I dropped it to them. Oh, well, let's move on from there. So we're going to have an external revenue service. The external revenue service is going to collect the tariffs that we charge to other countries, and the government will be funded by tariffs. We do not need a federal income tax. The federal income tax is unconstitutional, immoral, and it's also voluntary. It's very weird that people continue to volunteer to pay it, but hey. The problem is that, and I think we talked about this on Wednesday. I don't want to go all the way through it again, but the problem is that so many other parts of our life depend on our income tax returns and our credit ratings. And so all of that stuff is the forcing function that makes us voluntarily file and then pay taxes to the totally illegitimate federal government. But it's not even really to the federal government. It's just the banking arm of the foreign occupying government. All of it is ridiculous. Will the IRS be changed into the ERS? Hopefully it will be. We were told and scared with that story about how 87,000 armed tax agents were training to come audit us, guns a-blazing, knocking on our front doors. And I guess they're going to be redeployed to just protect our border. Whoops. Whoops. I guess that 4-year-long PSYOP wasn't true the whole time. And we should think about that as a, I don't know if a template is the right word, but consider what that is. In, what was that, 2021, under the illegitimate Biden regime, we were told that we should be scared of these 87,000 new tax agents. Donald Trump always calls it 88,000 now. I don't know if that's just to get more attention on the dispute over the numbers, but that nonsense story lasted for 3 or 4 years without anyone refuting it. So was it responsible to have believed that the whole time because no one could prove that it wasn't true? And in fact, there was some reason to believe that it was true, some evidence to believe that it was true. It was never true. The fact that Trump can just be like, yeah, we're going to redeploy them as border agents. They're not going to be in the IRS after all. If that can happen, it was never true. And disbelieving it from day one would have been a better move than believing it the entire time and being scared by it or scared of it the entire time. And yet that is not how we proceeded. Are we making that mistake over and 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 over again? Yes, we are. We are doing it all the time. And when people suggest, hey, don't believe that, that's bullshit, people will say, you can't say that's fake. You can't prove that's fake. Therefore, we're going to default to believing it. Well, how has that process worked out? Why are truthers and people in the truth community and people who are trying to be responsible about their epistemology, why are they believing that stuff and then forcing people to prove the negative that is unprovable when there was absolutely no reason to believe the positive assertion in the first place put forward by people who are untrustworthy and build our reality only through falsehoods? We should never believe those things, but we are convinced that we should, often by truthers, and that is very sad. And then views suggesting otherwise are marginalized as though they are somehow supporting the enemy. And, I don't want to harp on this stuff too much, but I really believe that it's worth mentioning and understanding. And truth be told, I am up to beyond my gills in listening to that nonsense and have very little patience for it anymore, including when it's put forward by people who are generally our friends. Makes no difference to me who is putting forward the falsehoods, who is believing the regime without evidence, and who is falling into the same patterns that allow us to still be in this place. What if the truth community, between the fake elections, the midterms of 2022, and the fake election of 2024, rather than trying to win the fake election, which is not something that can actually happen, was trying to expose the fact that our elections were fake and that, no, you don't need to vote? The right solution is not participating and telling other people, hey, this is nonsense. This is not how leaders are chosen. We do not need to participate in this. And the sooner we stop participating, the better off we are, because our enemy is not the Democrats. Our enemy is the Uniparty and the global regime. And sadly, many Democrats and Democrat supporters have sided with that enemy. We need to win them back, but we don't need to pretend that they are our primary enemy and that the way to defeat them is by participating in their system better than they can do. So people get upset and think I'm dividing the truth community. And if that's so, sorry, but that's what the sifters are for. The sifter is to divide the good from the bad. And supporting the regime's system by promoting participation in that system is doing the work of the enemy. Whether it's intended or not, it's still bad. But let's move on. So, an interesting moment yesterday. Kaitlan Collins had herself a hell of a time in this Oval Office session yesterday. She immediately piped in with questions trying to make Donald Trump look bad while he was holding up the executive order he had just signed. And if you remember from 2020, that was one of Kaitlan Collins' primary tactics in the White House press briefing room during the COVID briefings, whether it was Trump, particularly when it was Trump, but also when it was Kayleigh McEnany. When they would end a press conference and walk off, Kaitlan Collins would shout out a question, and in the language of the question would be contained something meant to make the administration or Donald Trump himself look bad, dishonest, ill-informed, whatever it was, a science denier. She would package her, what's the right way to say it? Her assertion, that assertion, in the language of her question, and she would get it in so that no one could respond. She would make that statement go over whatever the moment was supposed to be. And I think that she was doing that again yesterday. And Trump immediately reacted and was like, excuse me, no one asked you to speak yet. Shot her down. Very nicely done. I'm sure that all of you have seen, maybe, I guess, now that I've mentioned it, I have to, I'm kind of obligated now to show it. I should have just pulled it up. I was like, I don't need to show this. Everybody's already seen this. And what did I do? I led myself right back into having to show it. How do I do it? Ah, yes, here we are. Here we are. This will be perfect. We'll see that little Kaitlan Collins moment. And then we'll get into what I was actually going to talk about.
Ask you to speak yet, please. Right?
There it is. No one asked you to speak yet, please. All right. I went ahead and played a version with very low volume. It's all falling apart. Okay. Kaitlan Collins. So this was actually her asking a question about Glitch McConnell, old cocaine Mitch, former Senate Majority Leader in the totally illegitimate Senate.
Jr. as the next health secretary, citing conspiracy theories. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I feel sorry for Mitch.
That cut off the beginning of her question. She was asking about Mitch McConnell failing to vote for the confirmation of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as he had failed to vote for the confirmation of other people, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. So that is what Trump is answering.
Was one of the people that led. He wanted to go to the end and he wanted to stay leader. He's not equipped mentally. He wasn't equipped 10 years ago mentally, in my opinion. He'd let the Republican Party go to hell. If I didn't come along, the Republican Party wouldn't even exist right now. Mitch McConnell never really had it. He had an ability to raise money because of his position as leader, which anybody could do. You could do it even, and that's saying a lot. But the fact is that he raised money and he gave a lot of money to senators, and so he had a little loyalty based on the fact that as leader you could raise a lot of money. Senators would call me and they say, he wants to give me 25 million. Can I take it? I'd say, take the money. Take the money. But he engendered a certain amount of, I don't even call it loyalty. He, was able to get votes. But I was the one that got him to drop out of the leadership position, so he can't love me. But he's not voting against Bobby. He's voting against me, but that's all right. He endorsed me. Do you know that Mitch endorsed me, right?
Well, he did
You
have
think that was
polio,
easy?
and
What?
He had polio, obviously, and his
I don't
decided
know.
that
I don't know
was-
anything about he had polio. He had polio.
Are you doubting that he had polio?
I have no idea if he had polio. All I can tell you about him is that he shouldn't have been leader. He knows that. He voted against Bobby. He votes against almost everything now. He's a very bitter guy, and we have a very strong party, and he's almost not even really a very powerful member. I'd say he's not he's lost his power, and it's affected his vote. And it's one of those things. But in the meantime, Bobby did great, got more votes than anybody thought, and I think he's going to do phenomenally, just phenomenally in that position. And everybody else likewise did well. Not only well, they got more votes than anybody thought. Tulsi, look at how she did. She did great.
RFK Jr.
So all of that was just straight fire from Donald Trump going after Mitch McConnell about as hard as anyone's ever gone after Mitch. And you recall from his first term, and even from maybe 2020, 2021, early in that pause term, Mitch was the hero of the GOP establishment. They would always talk about what a great job Mitch did getting these Supreme Court justices confirmed. Oh, Mitch, he's just such a great tactician. It's just nonsense. Just nonsense. He makes a little dig on Kaitlan Collins about how anyone could have raised money in that position. He's the Senate Majority Leader. Of course, he can raise money. What could possibly be easier than selling Senate votes to the global regime, the people that print the money, the corporations that want the handouts and the regulations written so that they can become monopolies? What could be easier than selling that kind of influence? And of course, his wife is Chinese asset. The wife's sister, you remember, backed her Tesla into a pond and died like a couple of years ago. We were told that. Crazy. Glitch McConnell, Cocaine Mitch himself. The wife's father was a shipping magnate. Crazy stuff. The polio thing as well. What in the world? He had polio? What are we talking about at this point? And she's like, you don't believe that Mitch McConnell had polio? No, I don't believe that Mitch McConnell had polio. What are you talking about? And of course, the polio vaccine and the smallpox vaccine, that's the only proof in the world that vaccines work. And maybe we'll see Trump and RFK come out against those at some point. I hope we do see that. I really genuinely hope that we do see that at some point. Man, Trump said this thing yesterday. I'm just remembering it right now. And I feel like a jerk for not saving this particular link yesterday. And if you'll bear with me, we're going to do a hold for processing right here because I have to get it. Trump talked about this very weird period where he was not president for 4 years. Oh, gosh, it's so good. The hints toward devolution as a reality are coming pretty fast and furious these days. There are some people who, in the truth community, no less, who think that those of us in Badlands have been pitching some hostile conspiracy theory for these past few years. That was moronic from the get-go and hostile from the get-go. Very strange when that whole thing happened, but it's kind of become a rather ridiculous point of view, hasn't it? What should we then take about the people who spent their time doing that? Don't know. Everybody's just going to have to make those judgments for themselves. Maybe I'm not finding this. By the way, I might as well take just a second while I scan through this to say, first of all, thank you everybody for tuning into the live stream. This every Friday, it is significantly more well attended than the Friday prior, and I could not be more thankful for that. I really, really genuinely do appreciate that. And I want to make sure to thank you all for your support, and also to ask that on these days, we go ahead and hit the thumbs up. Maybe that helps. Theoretically, the thumbs up, the likes on Rumble videos are part of how the Rumble algorithm pushes certain things onto the trending tab and into the leaderboards and whatnot. Because, you know, if you pay attention to Devolution Power Hour on Saturday nights, we will often end up being the number one show on Saturdays, which doesn't mean that we get the most total views. It's the most total likes. So it's actual engagement, because sometimes when a live stream sits on the Rumble page in someone's feed for hours and hours, people will click in at some point and that counts as a view. So the view count is not actually the most realistic way to tell what content on Rumble is doing well. Let me see if I can, man, I really, really want to find, gosh, I really want to find that devolution proof that we dropped the other day, but I think I've blown it. Oh, well. Another gift subscription from Snowcat Operator. Thank you very much. My father, $25. Here's something to thank you for your shows, insight, humor, and common sense. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate you guys. Polymathanon, $10. We appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you too. Let's continue. I guess I'm not going to find that today, and it makes me very, very sad. And if someone watching wants to, if they know what I'm talking about from the info stream this week, go ahead and send it my way. I guess I've just blown it. Yes, I've just blown it. Okay, let us continue here. Oh, man. The pause continues. Kathy K, 2020, $25. Thank you, Chris. I absolutely love this live stream. You are so appreciated. You are as well, Kathy K. Thank you very, very much. So, as I said, Narendra Modi visited the White House yesterday. There was then a state dinner last night, or that was at least the plan. I have not seen any video or pictures from that, which is odd because you would think that there would have been a bunch of that. But maybe I've missed it, or maybe there just wasn't a bunch of that yesterday. And anything is possible. I feel I was just about to trash that Brett Baer clip. I feel like we're gonna have to hold on to that one. Maybe I'm gonna have to put it in the clip library where all the special clips go to live forever. This is Narendra Modi and Donald Trump from the Oval Office yesterday, joined by some of Modi's people, and Marco Rubio and Doug Burgum were in the meeting as well. Many people have been pointing out today that during this meeting, there were multiple camera angles that showed the door out of the Oval Office. And just outside that door was the picture of Donald Trump's mugshot, I was going to say fake mugshot, but everybody would probably spaz out. If you believe that Donald Trump really had real indictments and really had to go down to the Fulton County prison to take a mugshot, I don't know what to tell you, but his mugshot is there hanging framed just outside the Oval Office. It is hilarious. It is on par with the Gulf of America map just behind the Resolute desk. But here is one of the clips from Trump's sit down with Modi. So they have a meeting in the Oval Office. Then they have a little press conference, a press availability in the Oval Office. And then they go do their official press availability behind the podiums. Here we go.
Minister Modi of India. He is a great friend of mine for a long time. We've had a wonderful relationship, and we kept the relationship during the 4-year period. The period that was a very interesting period indeed. I got to see how not to do.
Okay, hold on a second. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever done on my own show. It's that clip. That clip's the one I'm looking for. Start over.
To have Prime Minister Modi of India. He is a great friend of mine for a long time. We've had a wonderful relationship, and we kept the relationship during the 4-year period. The period that was a very interesting period indeed. I got to see how not to do things. And we've just started up again, and we have, I think, some very big things to talk about. Number one is they're going to be purchasing a lot of our oil and gas. We have more oil and gas than any other country in the world by far. And they need it, and we have it. And we're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk about many things, but it's really an honor to see you, and you've been my friend for a long time, and congratulations on having done a great job.
Thank you.
I'm going to play that one more time after this. Isn't it amazing that Donald Trump has such good relationships with the actual leaders of actual world powers? And then on kind of a secondary level, he just basically owns people like Emmanuel Macron, goes over to France for the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral, is displayed to the world as king of the world. And he's got Putin and MBS and Xi and Bolsonaro and Narendra Modi and Orban and Netanyahu. And you just go on down the list. Actual leaders of significant world powers on Trump's side, on board with the Trump plan and the Trump agenda. And then he's got these little podunk countries in Europe that don't matter at all anymore and try to matter collectively as a European Union or European Commission. And they have been kind of relegated to a second-class status as well. And I know that if you are kind of a traditionalist as far as American foreign policy goes, which means that you are a normie or a fan of the uniparty establishment, then those really important countries that everybody used to care about, oh, Donald Trump is threatening our relationships with them. But in this new world, in this multipolar world order, and Donald Trump did say in one of those earlier clips, we are in a new world. These are the leaders who matter. These are the people who go along with Trump. And Trump just said during that very weird period that the relationship with Modi was kept alive the entire time, just as it was with Putin, presumably, Xi, presumably, and all these other leaders that were actually on display. Bolsonaro came up after the Joe Biden of it all. The same thing happened down in Brazil. You know, Brazil had their January 6th very violent insurrection. The Brazilian Joe Biden took over. Brazil had all of their social media censorship and all of that. Bolsonaro, he was facing indictments just like Trump was. And he came to Florida, came to visit Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. All these leaders, you had the leader of Poland. Why can't I think of his name right now? It's very annoying to me. I get frustrated with myself, you know? Various other leaders, Orban came and visited, all these people coming to Trump Tower, coming to Mar-a-Lago during this period. Let's hear Trump again.
Minister Modi of India. He is a great friend of mine for a long time. We've had a wonderful relationship, and we kept the relationship during the 4-year period. The period that was a very interesting period indeed. I got to see how not to do things. And we've just started up again.
4-year period, a very weird period. By the way, President Duda of Poland, I kept in my head, it kept going, Fico. And I was like, that's Slovakia. So all of these people coming to visit Donald Trump, clearly the king of the world, clearly the president throughout the last 4 years, Joe Biden, totally insignificant, totally fake president. We shouldn't have to beat around the bush about these things. We shouldn't have to judge our own seriousness relative to how the mainstream media and the global regime's propaganda media worldwide discusses these things. Just because the people on the Trump side played along with the global regime's display of how things really are doesn't mean that we need to ape that display. And at some point, the balance of narrative power will shift, and it will only be the way that we, you have described it for these last 4 years. It will never be that Joe Biden was the president this whole time. Just like in Venezuela, when we talk about Venezuelan politics, there was no era of President Juan Guaido. That era never happened. And the same thing happened here. The same thing happens in other countries. The global regime props up a candidate that it chooses to do business with and then tells the world that's the president, whether or not it is. Let me take just another pause here. Mary G. Rumbles, $10. Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Brain Strain again, $10. A wee bit of encouragement for a whole lot of good work. God bless. Thank you. Escape the Matrix 91, $20. Thank you for all you do, Chris. Easily one of the best podcasts out there. I thank you very much for that compliment and for your support. Thank you all. So once again, Donald Trump making it quite clear that he never went anywhere. He was maintaining his relationships with world leaders of the actual world powers for that entire time. And as I've mentioned, I think a bunch of times in the podcast now, at no point did these leaders of these other world powers do anything that would jeopardize their relationships with Donald Trump and the emergence of this multipolar world order. The only one even seen to have done that was Benjamin Netanyahu, our boy Yoo-hoo, when he went and congratulated Joe Biden on his election victory. So, you know, however people want to think about that is just fine. And I know the stories about Netanyahu. I understand the Israel thing. I get it. We just have to look at these things in multiple ways and deal with the reality as it exists now, understanding that some part or most of it, or maybe all of it, of the central narrative for however many decades was bullshit. Which is not to say that Yoo-hoo's a good guy or that Israel really is our greatest ally. Okay. None of that. I understand. But as it stands right now, he seems to be under control. Trump has seemed to display that to the world multiple times, including in their meeting last week. And so I am fairly certain that we're going to be just fine with all that, with our boy Yoo-hoo and the rest of it. If you think devolution or something like it was not going on these last 4 years, at this point, I don't know what to tell you. It was just too much for people to believe, and now it is almost too much to possibly believe that it was any other way. Let us continue with Narendra Modi. This is from their other appearance yesterday.
U.S. can shape a better world. Friends,
and of course, obviously, this is a translator.
the people of America are aware of President Trump's motto, "Make America Great Again," or MAGA. The people of America are well aware of it. The people of India, too, are focusing on both heritage and development as they move forward at a fast pace and with a firm resolve to ensure a developed India by 2047. If I were to say this, borrowing an expression from America, our vision for a developed India is to make India great again, or MEGA. When America and India work together, that is, when it's MAGA plus MEGA, it becomes MEGA, a mega partnership for prosperity. And it is this mega spirit that.
So if you average out the A and the I guess the E is the vowel in between. So MAGA plus MEGA equals mega. Elon Musk keeps saying, make Europe great again. So that's mega too. And speaking of Elon, in the chat, Deprogrammed to Know asked, can we ask, how is Elon Musk and the so-called smart people accessing the hubs of these criminal organizations without criminal resistance, unless these places were closed years ago? And I got to tell you, I think you're right. I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah, I mean, that is a plausible reading, and it is, I believe, more plausible than the central narrative. And at some point, people are just going to have to get comfortable with making these decisions on their own. Are you at the point where you are comfortable saying, yes, I know that all of our authoritative sources say it's this way. I don't see any way that that could actually be true. And so I don't believe it. And I actually think it's this other way. Why would we ever preference the view from the mainstream media above what we are able to discern through extensive research and extensive thought, when we know that they are just churning out a scripted narrative every day for the express purpose of misleading us so that they can exploit us and our beliefs? Gotta say, man, I gotta say, at some point, we just have to separate from the entire thing. And then a lot of people feel like that leaves them just floating out in space and unmoored from some kind of reality. I don't believe that is so. And I'm not going to be able to talk anyone into it. So what can you do? I'm going to take a second and just do one of these Rumble ads quickly. I am supportive of the Rumble project that Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO, is pursuing, and he's putting it out there day by day. And I really, I got to respect the guy. He's in communication with Badlands. John has an open dialogue with Chris Pavlovsky. They are responsive to our concerns. And I feel like supporting the Rumble cause is worth it right now. I mean, I don't think that's going to change in the future. I hope it doesn't change in the future. They did just bring Tim Pool on as a partner, so who knows what that means. But Pavlovsky said this today, by the way, on Truth Social. Now that Tether is officially one of the largest shareholders of Rumble, it is time to get very aggressive with the Rumble ecosystem versus Google. Rumble Wallet has already started. Rumble AI, Rumble Mail, Rumble User Storage, Rumble Calendar. This is a taste of what we are thinking about. And of course, they already have the Rumble Cloud, and the Rumble Cloud is the home of Truth Social. So they have this 1775coffee.com project. I'm going to pull this up and let you know about 1775coffee.com. Have you heard of the most recent advertising scandal? Let me break it down. The CEO of Rumble, Chris Pavlovsky, recently released an email from Inspire Brands and Dunkin' Donuts. The email explicitly states that the right-wing culture of Rumble is too polarizing. In other words, Dunkin' Donuts has a problem with right-wing culture and wants nothing to do with it or Rumble. So here's the solution. Stop buying products that don't support you and start supporting brands that do support you. The competing coffee brand that we all need to get behind is Rumble's 1775 coffee. For a limited time, Rumble is offering buy 2 bags of coffee and get one for free. Go to 1775coffee.com and enter promo code Duncan to get this limited time deal. And you can hit that QR code on the screen. And so understanding how it is to be censored and have the regime resistance to the project I'm doing, I understand Rumble's got the same situation. And so if we can help them, I think it helps all of us as well in terms of having a place that will protect free speech. I hope that's how we're doing it. You know, you just got to kind of put your shoulder behind the best option and push forward. And if you turn out wrong, then so be it. But I think that we are in a good place right now, and I'm excited about how Rumble is building, and I hope that they are continually interested in protecting our interests. Okay, let's continue. We're going to go back to the Oval Office from yesterday to kind of branch into some more geopolitics here. Here is President Trump. And I'm going to pause this a few times because I want to go through about 8 minutes of this here with Trump. I'm going to speed it up a little bit in the interest of time. But man, oh man, so much interesting stuff here.
I say America first. I say make America great again. That's what we're doing. I think it's the most important thing I've signed. I've signed some very important things. Right to try was so important. I mean, a lot of important things. Space Force, the biggest tax cuts in history. You know, this could be one of the most important things that we've ever signed.
Do you expect the Russians and President Putin to attend the summit in Saudi Arabia?
Eventually, yeah. Not quite yet. It's a little early. They're having a meeting in Munich tomorrow. Russia is going to be there with our people. Ukraine is also invited, by the way. Not sure exactly who's going to be there from any country, but high-level people from Russia, from Ukraine, and from the United States.
Do you have Russia back to the G7, sir?
I'd love to have them back. I think it was a mistake to throw them out. Look, it's not a question of liking Russia or not liking Russia. It was the G8. And, you know, I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back. Obama and a couple of other people made a mistake, and they got Russia out. It's very possible that if that was the G8, you wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. And if I was president, you definitely wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. Russia would have never attacked Ukraine. But you ask a very good question, the G8. It used to be the G8, and then these people threw them out. And I was arguing with Trudeau and with numerous of the people. Actually, Prime Minister Abe, a great man from Japan, agreed with me 100%, and some of the others did too. But I got there. It was a G7, as you know. They had already been terminated. I think it would have been very helpful, and it still would be helpful to have Russia be a part of that mix. So and I think if they were, I don't think you would have had the problem that you have right now.
Russia is part of the G20. They kicked them out, of course, because they illegally annexed.
Okay, we're going to pause there for just a second. And I want to share a meme. I made a joke yesterday about this meeting, Trump and Putin going down to Saudi Arabia. If you remember, during what is now known as the submission tour, Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia. He got the sword dance, and then there was the touching of the orb. And then he went over to Russia, and Putin handed him the soccer ball and said, the ball is now in your court. And so I joked, what if down in Saudi Arabia, Trump brings Putin's soccer ball and they put it where the orb was, and then they all touch it and it starts glowing. So Bry Guy in my Telegram chat yesterday went ahead and put this together for me. Now, maybe we can get I'm going to try to get him to put Mohammed bin Salman in there. But isn't that a nice glowing soccer ball orb? Melania is there. And for some reason, this doctor is here. I'm just kidding. That's probably some traditional garb of a Middle Eastern nation whose people I just offended. So Trump is talking about Russia and whether and their role as part of the global community and whether or not they should be in the G7. Now, Trump doesn't really care about these multilateral organizations too much, but he also says it was stupid for Obama to remove them from the G7. And then Kaitlan Collins pipes in again to talk about the G20, and Trump shuts that one down pretty quickly.
Crimea. I mean, how would you have responded if Russia invaded or
They took Crimea during.
Hold on a second. Let me just go back here a few seconds.
You would have had the problem that you have right now.
Russia is
not part of the
because
G20.
They kicked them out, of course, because they illegally annexed Crimea. I mean, how would you have responded if Russia invaded or
They took Crimea during Obama. They took. Now they're looking to take the whole thing. Then they took a big chunk of land and people, as you know, during Bush, and now they're trying to take the whole thing during Biden. You know, the only one that didn't give them anything is Trump. They never took anything with Trump. Nothing. Not 2 inches of property of land. But Crimea was Obama, and then Bush gave him a lot. You remember? And then, in fact, it's a sort of a standard little phrase. And Biden's giving him everything because this is a war that shouldn't have been had. And the only one that didn't give him anything is Trump. It's the way it is.
What's the message from Wall Street about these tariffs? So there's been some nervousness.
And so that's part of the conversation being had in the public narrative. It's not really a conversation. There's no way that Ukraine is going to get Crimea back. There's no chance of that happening. It's a silly conversation. But that is why they were kicked out in Kaitlan Collins' telling of it, and all good. But hysterical, these reactions. And you can see Donald Trump presenting the real version of how the world is, not the world as it's been presented by the global regime media over these last 10 or 11 years.
On Wall Street about the
I don't think
impact.
so. I mean, there hasn't been very much, and I think it's going to make the United States stronger, and in many ways, it could make other countries stronger too. You know, other countries want to have a strong United States. They want to have a strong America, and I think it's going to make us very, very strong, much stronger. And we have a lot of work we're doing on the military. Our military already. I've authorized.
Why would other countries want a strong United States? And did other countries want a strong United States before? And I guess the additional question would be, are the countries who want a strong United States the same ones as before? Because I think that would actually be representative of the real dynamic here. Okay, so we have the British Commonwealth nations, we have Israel, and that's about it. The nations of Europe, the colonial nations of Europe, they want the strong United States because through NATO and through the United Nations, the U.S. is the enforcement arm. The U.S. military is the enforcement arm. The American dollar is part of that enforcement arm. The global media is part of that enforcement arm. And so at that point, they wanted a strong United States because the United States would provide for the defense of all those nations. And they would be the heavy whenever one of these small rogue nations no longer wants to comply with the terms of the global regime's agenda. Those nations wanted a strong United States. Now those nations don't want the strong United States because the United States, as part of a multipolar world order, is not operating on their behalf. So if you have a strong United States in the northern hemisphere, the Western hemisphere, and then you have Brazil and maybe some of these smaller countries in South America. In the Middle East, you have Saudi Arabia. In Africa, though, some of those countries are starting to kind of take responsibility for their own independence and well-being. And some of the Middle Eastern nations, but most particularly Russia and China, are guaranteeing security there. India wants a strong United States. This is creating balance in what can be a stable multipolar world order. So these countries are going to want a strong United States because the United States, as a sovereign nation with some strength, can actually stand up to the global regime and then not be part of the enemy of the rest of these nations. Donald Trump is laying out the multipolar world order. And man, hold on. We're going to have to do one more hold for processing, because Alexander Dugin, the Russian political philosopher, had a very interesting post on this the other day. Hopefully I'll be able to quickly find it. He essentially said that the United States and Russia could be friends now, which I think is wonderful. Why would we want to be enemies with these other world powers? We're told it's because they're communists and because they're our adversaries. Is that true? Well, it certainly doesn't seem to be true unless Donald Trump is a communist and our adversary. And that doesn't seem to be true. So let's pause on this for a second. I'll pull this up. Hold for processing. Alexander Dugin, no more fears and complexes regarding mutual sympathy between Trumpists and Russians. Why should we be afraid of the globalists? They are doomed. Let us finish them on both sides. Us and you, it is the real deal. I will accept that offer. And Donald Trump will accept that offer on behalf of the people of the United States, I believe. And again, there might be those who find them, who consider themselves kind of more traditionalists in terms of American foreign policy. That era is over. And the fact that people don't understand that yet is irrelevant. They can argue on behalf of it. They can believe that China and Russia and these nations are our enemies, but that doesn't make it so. It's not so. That right there, they call him Putin's brain. I think of Alexander Dugin as like the Steve Bannon of Russia. Why wouldn't the United States and Russia and these other global superpowers, why wouldn't we want to have some sort of stability with these nations rather than just being the enforcement arm of Europe? That would be crazy. We're going to battle these other nations or believe that there is some battle between these other nations so that we can be the enforcers of Europe and Europe's agenda. That's nuts. It's funny because that's kind of what the book 1984 is about. And Trump is essentially leading us out of that 1984 situation. I mean, it's my belief that we should all be very happy about this. Let's go back to Trump in the Oval Office.
Some contracts to be built that are very substantial. We're building the greatest equipment in the world. We have the greatest military equipment in the world. We're building it. At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two. And I'm going to say, there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at 400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
So he was going to meet with China and Russia so that these three supposedly adversarial superpowers could denuclearize together. Now, most people who have listened to my show for any amount of time understand my position on nuclear weapons, and we're going to get into a little bit of that in a few minutes. But they were going to denuclearize together. And at that point, they would be able to save an enormous amount in the defense budget. It's talking about $500 billion. Does that matter? Yeah, that matters. If we were going to spend that money, global regime fiat currency money. So, you have to adjust for that. But in the context of this understanding, That would be $500 billion that wouldn't be added each year to our deficit, which means it's added to our debt. And that could be redeployed for American prosperity, either to help our own citizens build our infrastructure, et cetera, or just not to put us further in debt and jeopardize us financially forever. He's going to come back to this in just a second.
In the United States, or would you travel to China for that?
For what?
A China meeting.
I tell people all the time, the question is who's going to have the first meeting? Where are you going to? I say this to Putin, to President Xi. I say to everybody, never bothered me. I'm willing to say I'll go first. It doesn't matter. It's the end result that counts. So it doesn't make any difference.
When do you want to have a conversation about global defense spending, you, China,
Well,
Russia?
I'd like to have that as soon as things settle down. I'm going to have that conference primarily with China and Russia because those are the two that really are out there. And we're going to have them spend a lot less money, and we're going to spend a lot less money. And I know they're going to do it. They agreed to it. We were talking about denuclearizing, and President Putin and I agreed that we were going to do it in a very big way. There's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many you could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons, and they're building nuclear weapons, and China's building new nuclear weapons, and China's trying to catch up because they're very substantially behind, but within 5 or 6 years they'll be even. And we're all spending a lot of money that we could be spending on other things that are actually hopefully much more productive. Hopefully there'll never be a time when we need those weapons. If there's ever a time when we need nuclear weapons, like the kind of weapons that we're building and that Russia has and that China has to a lesser extent, but will have, that's going to be a very sad day. That's going to be probably oblivion.
Do you see that as separate conversations, or do you see one giant summit with you, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, I could see that. Let things calm down a little bit. When I left, we had no Middle East problem. We had no Russia going into Ukraine. They never would have done it. Putin never would have done it. And I came back and we got like the whole world is blowing up. So when we straighten it all out, then I want to have one of the first meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia. And I want to say, let's cut our military budget in half. And we can do that. And I think we'll be able to do it.
None of that would have ever happened if he had been president. And, we can keep tracking these things over time, but as things have gone over time, it's now been 3 years of the very brutal invasion. Does it seem more like a very deadly war is happening over there, or does it seem less like a very deadly, very serious war is happening over there? The entire situation has become almost comical at this point, which makes sense because, of course, they have a comedic actor as the fake president of the fake country, Ukraine. And even back at the very beginning, they had like U2 coming to play in a subway. The dumbest stuff. The ghost of Kyiv. Remember the maternity hospital with the Instagram model, like carrying the baby out? Snake Island. What else was there? The threats on Zaporozhye, and we'll get into some of the nuclear stuff again in a little bit, as I said. Narrative war drums this entire time, and we are still getting the warmongering in the narrative, and the reality is not capable of supporting that. We're going to get back into that. I want to do like a minute more of this speech.
Identifies wasteful spending in the Defense Department, defense contractors, and the like. Are you willing to go after that spending as well?
We have to go waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah, and we're doing that.
I'm just wondering about your conversations on defense spending. Would you want to do that as a trilateral, or would you use the existing body that also already includes China and Russia, the G20?
I know it's the people. It's President Putin, President Xi. I don't need bodies. I don't need anything. It's people. It's all about people. It's about relationship and people. And, I've had a good relationship with President Putin. I've had a good relationship with President Xi. It's about people. And I think when things straighten out, which I hope will be in the not too distant future, the meeting I want to have first is a meeting with China and a meeting with Russia on slowing down, stopping, and reducing nuclear weapons in particular, and also on not having to spend the kind of money we're all spending on weapons, military weapons generally.
So he doesn't care about these international bodies, these multilateral agreements, these multilateral assemblies. He does not care about them. The opinions of globalism and the global regime at large are irrelevant. They don't have the power to control the situation on the ground. And there's absolutely no reason for their involvement. He can make a deal with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and just move on in his own direction. It's a total breakdown of the global system, a total breakdown of the top-down control. We talked about the planned economy. This is the planned world order, and it is breaking down. So let's move to some of the Ukraine stuff. This is the Wall Street Journal from earlier this week. This was on Tuesday. The world's policeman goes rogue. So they're not even shy about it. America is the world's policeman. And this is written by a man named Anders Fogh Rasmussen. He is the Secretary General of NATO from 2009 to 2014 and Prime Minister of Denmark before that, from 2001 to 2009. Short little piece here. The first weeks of the Trump administration have been difficult, even painful. I've dedicated much of my life to a rules-based international order led by the U.S., and I worry that is ending. Well, here's the thing. It was never actually led by the U.S. The U.S. was the face of the rules-based international order. That doesn't make it the leader. We were advertised to the world and to ourselves as the leader of this international rules-based world order. But that is meaningless if the people serving as president and as senators and as congressmen, et cetera, as governors of states, are all members of the uniparty implementing the global regime's agenda here in the United States. What would it mean to be the leader of that if the leader is following orders? A leader can't be following orders. The world needs a policeman, and since World War II, the U.S. has filled that role. But what if the policeman no longer exercises his authority over geopolitical gangsters or becomes abusive toward the world's most steadfast rule followers? Well, I guess your system of rules is gone. I never imagined I would hear a U.S. president declare his intentions to expand our territory, as Donald Trump did in his inaugural address. He continues to suggest that Canada should become the 51st state, and he has refused to rule out military force to secure America's control of the Panama Canal and the autonomous Danish territory of Greenland. Ruling out military force does not mean that military force will ever be necessary. Panama, China's already left. That deal's done. Greenland? Really? We don't need military force to take Greenland. That deal seems like it's done too. And the point is that there is no other superpower to provide security for all of North America. So that's going to be the United States. And then other countries will provide similar security for their regions. That's how the superpowers are going to divide up that sort of control. And that will provide a balance rather than being the unipolar world order where the global regime decides everything and then the United States enforces it on their behalf. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are watching. If the U.S. can take Greenland for America's security, Mr. Xi will claim he can invade Taiwan for Chinese security. Well, he doesn't need to invade Taiwan because Taiwan is already part of China, and it's American policy and hence global regime policy that there is one China. It's called the one China policy, which means Taiwan is part of China. It would be like them claiming that the United States was invading California once they declare that California is its own state. And by the way, it could be possible that we're going that direction and that we just have these several states and a United States government that essentially brings the military together, the militias together for the defense of this land if there is ever an invasion. That probably wouldn't happen. Where were we? Mr. Putin's absurd arguments about conquering Ukraine for Russia's security would be validated by Mr. Trump. Well, no, that's not what would be validated. what would be validated is that the global regime proxy state of Ukraine was never a real state to begin with. And as Russia declares that to the rest of the world, the United States is not going to contest them on that. As a child, I admired John F. Kennedy, who said that America would, quote, pay any price, bear any burden to assure the survival and the success of liberty, end quote. And that is what they would do. That is still what Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, President Trump is doing. That's all he's doing. Preserving liberty in the face of global communism and totalitarian control over the entire earth. As a young politician, I cheered Ronald Reagan's 1985 State of the Union address, in which he said America's, quote, mission is to nourish and defend freedom and democracy, end quote. As Danish Prime Minister, I worked with President George W. Bush because I believed Denmark's security was best guaranteed by a close alliance with the U.S., or because you were just part of the global regime. And so was George W. Bush and his administration, run by Dick Cheney, just as the Ronald Reagan administration was run by George H.W. Bush on behalf of the global regime. As Mr. Trump's threats against some of America's closest allies, including Denmark, Mr. Trump's threats, I have had to revise my views. Today, we Europeans must be prepared to protect ourselves from those who lie in wait just outside our borders. Europe must develop a stronger and more effective defense to deter Russia and any other nation. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is still the cornerstone of European defense. But given that Mr. Trump has raised doubts about America's willingness to fulfill its NATO obligations and has threatened two allies, Canada and Denmark, I see no other option than to ensure we can stand on our own in any situation. We must build a coalition of willing European countries that are prepared to provide a robust European defense. We should strengthen the European Union's security dimension and move to majority voting to prevent pro-Russia members from vetoing important security measures, and sign a security agreement between the EU and the UK as soon as possible to protect ourselves and our shared critical infrastructure. Okay. So the United States, as far as European security goes, is out. And the pro-Russia members they're talking about are, of course, like Hungary and Slovakia, and we'll see probably Poland, who else emerges there. But what they want to do is try to consolidate their power and present themselves as a comparable world power. But there is no comparable world power. And that's the result of decade after decade after decade of assuming that the United States would always supply the blood and treasure to protect Europe so that they can give their people retirement at 59 and 30-hour work weeks and free health care and the rest of the socialist offering throughout Europe that they've had so that the Spanish can take siesta. Good luck, commies. History tells us that trade wars have only losers. Well, no. The history as presented by the global communist order might suggest that. But there's no economic theory that actually suggests that. And we don't have to have trade wars. Reciprocal tariffs do not suggest a trade war at all. Consumers pay more, inefficient domestic companies are protected from competition, and the result is less economic growth, lower productivity, and less prosperity for everyone. Well, perhaps by your numbers. But when you talk about inefficient domestic companies, what does that mean in a world where what we have are inefficient transnational companies that exist and prosper and succeed because of a globally planned economy and regulations that provide them monopolies wherever they operate? That's what we have right now. That's breaking down. And this global communist is attempting to tell us that our countries are not going to be competitive or efficient and that the consumers will pay more. Well, would you as a consumer be content to pay slightly more for goods if you were no longer paying a federal income tax? Maybe. Is it possible that through actual market competition rather than the fake market competition we are told about through these manipulated markets might lower prices on its own? Is it possible that the value of our currency might increase when it's not being continually inflated so that we can send billions and billions of dollars overseas for nonsense projects that enhance global communism and pay off the partners in these other nations? If President Trump brings a tariff war to our door, we must fight back aggressively. Europe's response should be dollar for dollar retaliation, targeted at the U.S. industries and businesses where it will hurt the most. Mr. Trump respects only strength. Wonderful. Bring it on. What do we need from Europe? I hope that the new U.S. administration doesn't end an international order that has created more security and more prosperity for more people than any other in history. But hope is no strategy. Europe must be prepared or suffer the consequences. Okay. Well, if you're saying that you've brought more security and more prosperity for people around the world, I don't know if that's true. And I am willing to test the waters on that. They have had a globally planned economy for decades, enforced through the mechanisms we discussed earlier. This right here is mentioning the U.S. as the world's policeman. That's the final mechanism after you go through the media and reputational attacks, then through the economic attacks, sanctions, the rest of it, then the cutting off from the rest of the world of resources and trade routes. And then finally, you get to Team America World Police, and they are now announcing publicly in their media outlets that that world order is over. Whoops, I guess. We are going to continue with all of this in just a moment, but I'm going to take just a quick break for a minute. And so please enjoy this explanation of conspiracy theories and how the world actually works from the film A Parallax View, or just Parallax View, The Parallax View, Parallax View.
Now, this is an announcement, not a press conference. Therefore, there will be no questions. A complete transcript of the investigation is being prepared for publication on March 1st. At that time, the committee will hold a full-scale press conference. After nearly 4 months of investigation, followed by 9 weeks of hearings, it is the conclusion of this committee that Senator Carroll was assassinated by Thomas Richard Linder. It is our further conclusion that he acted entirely alone, motivated by a misguided sense of patriotism and a psychotic desire for public recognition. The committee wishes to emphasize that there is no evidence of any wider conspiracy. No evidence whatsoever. Now, it's our hope that this will put an end to the kind of irresponsible and exploitive speculation conducted by the press in recent months. As I've said, the complete text of the hearings, which provides the basis for the committee's findings, will be published March 1st. When you have had a chance to examine the evidence, you will have every opportunity to ask those questions which remain unanswered, if there are any. That is all. Thank you.
Ah, lovely. What a movie that is. Okay, so we are back. Isn't that better than a commercial? Movie break instead of commercial break. Although now that I come back, I think maybe we should have a commercial break. We'll hold a few more minutes. Actually, you know what? Let's just knock this out. I'm going to do another one of these Rumble ads, and I hope that these aren't too terribly offensive. And if they are, you can let me know. Maybe this one will be. I don't think so. In today's society, it's tough to be a man in a world dominated by overly masculine liberal women. That's just not how it's meant to be. And you can't complain about how tough it is to be a man if you're being a man. So come on, commercial. Everywhere where you look, it's gender neutral, this product, or made for her, that product. That is why we started a company that embodies the ethos of Men's Lives Matter, too. With products that aren't designed to be gender neutral or used by people with pronouns, our products at Rumble are designed and built for men by men, period. So if you struggle with low energy, mood swings, or hair loss, or if you need to perform better at the gym, maybe in bed, and recover quicker after, throw out all your other garbage supplements and try animal organs. Wow. They are traditionally the most nutrient-rich supplements on the planet, but our bison organs are a step above. The grass-fed, non-vaccinated bison are a species where the weak are allowed to die and only the strong survive. So here is our commitment to you. From men who have real confidence in their products, try this today, and if you don't like it, fine, return it for a refund. Go to benaked.com, code studio, and get 15% off today. benaked.com, or go to that QR code over on the side. There's a lion with a crown on, which means you know it's powerful. And if you don't like thinking about that lion being naked, consider it when you're typing it out into your search bar, just write Ben Aked. It's probably like a Middle Eastern name or something. benaked.com. Then it's not offensive. Let's get into some more of this global business, and this will bring us on home. Not this story, but one more segment, and then that'll do it for this week. But it's a good long segment, don't worry. Unless you don't like good long segments, and then this is probably scaring the shit out of you. Let's go to the ridiculous. Actually, you know what? Before we go to this article, this is going to be from CNN, but I want to share with everyone what I saw today as the two main stories on CNN.com. It is unbelievable that this website continues to operate. Perhaps it's been taken over. One can only hope. This is what I was greeted with this morning. Russia strikes site of former Chernobyl power plant near Ukraine's border. Oh, no. So, a false flag, fake attack on a nuclear power plant that has been inactive for 40 years. And we've already been lied to about the stories when it comes to Chernobyl, and maybe we'll get into that in a minute. But also, this was the second story. Astronauts stuck in space for months talk about the hardest part of returning to Earth. The most trusted name in news, everybody. Fake nuclear attack in Ukraine. Fake nuclear attack in a fake country. Whoops. And then a story about fake astronauts in a fake space station. This is what we're dealing with. And we're supposed to pretend that this stuff is real so that stupid people take us seriously. People that wore 2 masks in their car are going to tell us, oh, you can't say that. And also some very, very serious base and red pill people. Oh, you're just going too far. Am I? You know what's going too far? Believing anything the media has told us ever. That's going too far. How about that? Contend with that. All right, so let's get into this story from CNN. Europe fears, not feels at all. Europe fears Trump-Putin dirty deal as Ukraine scrambles for a seat at the table. So there is the comedic actor, as dressed up as we've ever seen him. Got a winter jacket on there. It's cold. It's not just in his sweatshirt. President and comedic actor Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday said Ukraine would not accept a peace deal negotiated by the United States and Russia alone. He conceded it was, quote unquote, not pleasant. that Trump spoke with Putin before calling into doubt the West's policy of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine that has largely held over 3 years of Russia's full-scale invasion. We have been hearing these phrases for 3 years. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Oh, it kind of rhymes. Isn't that cute? That was the U.S. policy. But it wasn't the U.S. policy. It wasn't anything. It was just a statement that convinced people that there was another side in this deal that needed to be respected and regarded and dealt with. That being the side of the global regime and quote unquote Europe and the United Nations, the European Union, NATO, all that. They could have been totally ignored this entire time and it would not have mattered at all. Because all of that is a paper tiger and might not exist anymore. Also, the full-scale invasion is so ridiculous. Donald Trump has pumped the numbers of deaths in the Russia-Ukraine thing up so high to this point. It's now responsible for 1.5 million deaths, all just on that battlefield. Just people dying left and right, bodies everywhere. The only thing, remember, that stops a bullet is a body because the land there is so flat. And that's how they have all these rare earth minerals, as we talked about on Wednesday. Kaitlan Collins, the European Union's foreign policy chief. Oh, no, sorry. I'm skipping ahead here. Both Trump and his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, have since said they believe negotiations will involve Ukraine, though Trump, when asked by a reporter on Wednesday if he saw Ukraine as an equal partner in peace negotiations, responded only, "That's an interesting question." And of course, it's an interesting question. Ukraine isn't a real country. There aren't real negotiations going on. And the leverage for negotiations is coming only from the global regime and the dying, dead unipolar order represented by these global governing bodies. They are not partners in a negotiation. They don't matter. They don't have the real power required to influence this situation. And we've watched them try again and again over the years through the narrative, through the story layer that they have put on top of any actuals going on in Ukraine, same as in Israel. Will they be an equal partner in negotiations? That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because Trump's not prepared yet to blow their narrative up. And so he plays whatever hand he's been dealt. If they want to keep dealing these different narratives and laying them down on the table, showing them to the world, well, Donald Trump's going to interact with that narrative, taking it as real, and then moving people away from whatever direction the regime intended to take that narrative in. And we see that pattern playing out over and over and over and over and over. And this is a pattern we've been discussing on this show for, nearly 5 years now. Kaitlan Collins, the European Union's foreign policy chief, warned against a quick fix and a dirty deal to end the war, saying that Europe and Ukraine must be at the table for talks because no peace deal can be implemented without their involvement. Why? What stake does Europe have in this? And of course, Ukraine, as a fake country, doesn't have a stake either. The territory known as Ukraine was taken over. The government was overthrown in 2014 by a color revolution. The global regime, George Soros, we went through these documents a pretty long time ago. I'm going to have to bring those back at some point. I think it was in Mint Press News. Maybe I can find it quickly. Let me just do an unexpected hold for processing, and maybe I'll just locate it. Gosh, it would be great if I could just find it. I'm going to open this article, and if it's not it, it is it. How great. I'm going to post this in the chat here on Rumble so that you can all have a look. And we're not going to go through this today. I've gone through it on the podcast before, but let's close this CNN article. We will return to that. This is mintpressnews.com from June 15th, 2015. Leaked George Soros, puppet master behind Ukrainian regime, trails of corruption revealed. Okay. And so this article goes through how George Soros is trying to take over Ukraine and flood global regime money into the country to stand up all these new businesses, take over their resource-based industries, and make a ton of money. And here we have, let's just read this part about the puppet master. The totality of what is revealed in the 3 hacked documents show that Soros is effectively the puppet master, pulling most of the strings in Kyiv. Soros Foundation's Ukraine branch, International Renaissance Foundation, has been involved in Ukraine since 1989. His IRF doled out more than $100 million to Ukrainian NGOs 2 years before the fall of the Soviet Union, creating the preconditions for Ukraine's independence from Russia in 1991. Soros also admitted to financing the 2013 and 2014 Maidan Square protests that brought the current government into power. Soros's foundations were also deeply involved in the 2004 Orange Revolution that brought the corrupt but pro-NATO Viktor Yushchenko into power with his American wife, who had been in the U.S. State Department. In 2004, just weeks after Soros's International Renaissance Foundation had succeeded in getting Viktor Yushchenko as president of Ukraine, Michael McFaul, total neocon and globalist, wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. McFaul, a specialist in organizing color revolutions, who later became U.S. ambassador to Russia, revealed, did Americans meddle in the internal affairs of Ukraine? Yes. The American agents of influence would prefer different language to describe their activities: democratic assistance, democracy promotion, civil society support, etc. But their work, however labeled, seeks to influence political change in Ukraine. The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, or USAID, or USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, and a few other foundations sponsored certain U.S. organizations, including Freedom House, the International Republican Institute, that's the IRI, the National Democratic Institute, the Solidarity Center, the Eurasia Foundation, Internews, and several others to provide small grants and technical assistance to Ukrainian civil society. The European Union, individual European countries, and Soros-funded International Renaissance Foundation did the same. So this is a lot of the stuff that Elon Musk has been dealing with, that Mike Benz has been talking about. Mint Press News in 2015. I presented that on this show. I can look back at my old channel on Telegram. This is back October of 2022. And my pal in my Telegram chat, 17 Ronin, posted that and sent it over to my chat back in 2022. Incredible, isn't it? None of this stuff is new. Let's go back to CNN. That's the program, by the way. Overthrow the country, flood it with regime money, set up shop so that the transnational corporations infiltrate. Then you infiltrate the government. Everybody gets paid off. People get rich. That money begins trickling down into society so that everybody thinks, oh my gosh, this total changeover in leadership, this is creating a new democracy here. We're all getting wealthy. Look at how entertaining everything is. It's just American society put American society, quote unquote, put in a new country. The cultural degradation follows. Everyone who supports the country in a nationalist, populist way becomes impoverished until the country is so bad that they have to flee to another nation. It really is incredible. It's so very evil. So Trump's call with, getting back to the CNN article, Trump's call with Putin and his subsequent announcement that negotiations would begin immediately on reaching a deal in Ukraine blindsided European leaders and threatened to leave them with the grunt work of funding and overseeing any settlement. Oh, he blindsided them, did he? What exactly did he blindside with that timing? Oh, JD Vance going to Europe for the Munich Security Conference, where they were going to do all their negotiations. And now Trump preempted all those negotiations first with Vladimir Putin and then with the comedic actor Volodymyr Zelensky. So there's actually no way to portray the establishment regime in the United States represented on the global stage, on the world stage, global in quotes, by JD Vance. There's no way to portray to the world that there's been any effect whatsoever from that visit, because Donald Trump on the reality prime layer already took care of these things. And he let the world know, hey, I've already talked to Putin. I've already talked to Zelensky. You're worried about me just making deals with Putin, even though I don't need Zelensky and I don't need the Europeans? Well, I already took care of that too and talked to Zelensky myself. In fact, we had a perfect phone call, just like we did back in 2019. In other words, Washington will do the deal and may get paid in rare earth minerals by Ukraine, as Trump has demanded, and Europe will pick up the tab. Wait a second, Europe will pick up the tab for what? For its own defense? Is that too much to ask? And of course it is, if you still believe that the unipolar world order, the top-down control system, and Team America World Police are going to remain in place. And they're not. They're not there now. They're already gone. And you can try to display to the world that that system still exists, and you can try to prove it based on JD Vance attending your stupid little meeting like Kamala did back in 2022. But JD's visit is as meaningless as Kamala's is. Let's see if we can find, I would love if I could just locate this video quickly. Remember Kamala when she visited? Oh, so dumb. Please, please let me find this video. Oh, yes. Oh, this is going to be great. Telegram is the best information app by far. I've been saying that for years. It continues to improve. Twitter is not better. Twitter is portrayed as better because that's where the public conversation is happening. No, it's not. There is a public conversation happening there, but it is all affected by the intellectual kids table problem on Twitter. It is a censored platform. So despite the fact that the world's most prominent people are communicating over there, that is just a measure of the popularity among people considered prominent by the mainstream. It's not the best app for information. It's not the best app for truth. It is not a free speech platform. But let's watch Kamala from back in 2022 when she went over to make sure that Putin wouldn't launch his very brutal invasion at the very same Munich Security Conference. So we have one fake vice president following around another fake vice president.
Any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
Oh, I love it. Isn't that amazing? Russia is a big country. Ukraine is a small country. And Russia is invading its neighbor, and that's wrong. Genius. Thank goodness we have vice presidents. And I know people lose their minds when I say things that are not nice about the based and red pill JD Vance. But as we discussed on Wednesday, it's awfully weird hearing those sorts of comments from people who are convinced that Mike Pence is a bad guy, or Mike Pompeo or John Bolton or whoever. It's not possible that Trump would put a bad guy in that position. Well, then you got to give up the Mike Pence thing, don't you? I don't make the rules, I don't make the rules. And by the way, let me show you this from the based and red pill JD Vance, the vice president who always, isn't it amazing? He always rolls around the world and takes pictures of himself in the Air Force 2 jacket that looks exactly like Trump's Air Force 1 jacket. Nothing? Nobody thinks that's weird? Check this out. This is from NBC News, March 19th, 2023. So nearly 2 years ago now. This is when they were hyping Ron DeSantis as the GOP nominee. He was going to be our next president. He was supposed to be the guy leading all of this here. So if you removed Trump, the rest of the narrative would still be playing out on that narrative only layer, and Ron DeSantis would be playing the part of president. That was as intended. Look at how he's being presented by NBC News. How Midwest roots shaped Ron DeSantis's political values and perspective. Very long article, very complimentary. The mainstream media was always very nice to Ron and very nice to JD. And we've covered that a million times. Politico articles. Look at this picture, though. That's what you were supposed to be seeing. Whoa, where'd it go? Just disappearing. How about that? Turning point action. That's Charlie Kirk. And then you've got Ron and JD just right there. And this goes through Ron's roots in the Rust Belt. Now, is this all kayfabe? Just staged to make Donald Trump look good? Or was something else supposed to happen? And Donald Trump is just spotlighting all of the rising stars of the next generation of the GOP establishment, just as he did with the Democrat establishment, so that they can be shown for exactly what they are and eliminated from our political conversation. If the idea is to give power back to you, the American people, as Trump promised in his 2017 inaugural, why would power be handed to people who were already being elevated as the rising stars of the Republican establishment? He's taken all of them across the board, from the cast of Fox News to various governors to senators. He's taken them out of their positions and stuck them in prominent positions in his administration, so that they can be shown to the American public, execute Trump's agenda, and in the meantime, become totally unserious as potential future presidents. If you still think that JD Vance is a serious candidate for 2028 president, I don't know what to tell you. It's pretty ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. Let's go back to CNN. A NATO official, we're just jumping ahead in the article here, talking about whether or not Ukraine will ever join NATO. Pete Hegseth says that the Trump administration did not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome. It has never been a realistic outcome. It is part of what was agreed to when they were making deals years and years ago, before the very brutal invasion had to be shown to the world as a narrative device spanning these 3 years, so that we could look back at World War II history, understand who the Nazis really were, understand what NATO was, what the Atlantic Alliance was, what our military actually is and will do, and on whose behalf, what these European militaries actually are, how the military-industrial complex operates, how willing our warmongering neocon establishment with its partners on the uniparty left is to waste American blood and treasure to keep these forever wars going forever. They tried to hold on to their forever war in Afghanistan. That didn't work. So they attempted to have one in Ukraine. That didn't work. Their forever war in the Middle East, the Israel aspect of it, all of it is going away. And to try to big picture this and summarize my viewpoint on this, Donald Trump is destroying on an actual level and a narrative level the global regime's ability to execute the system of control that I outlined at the beginning of the show. The media, the finance, the resources, the trade routes, the military. All of that on an actual level has to be taken away from the quote unquote global regime's control, globe, and on a narrative level. People have to understand that thing that we've been told about how the world actually works, it's false. And even if it was true at one point, it's not anymore. A NATO official subsequently briefed that NATO membership is not necessarily something that needs to be negotiated with Russia. It's something that's a decision for allies, and that decision has been linked to when the time is right. Well, there's no chance that the United States is going to bring Ukraine into the NATO alliance, because the NATO alliance, if it exists anymore, is not something that's, there's virtually no way I can imagine. I want to never say never on this stuff, because a lot of it is ultimately unknown, fog of war, whatever else. But the idea that the United States is going to put its military behind the global regime proxy state in Ukraine to contest Russia is insane. Now, if there's some role for the United States there as a regional stabilization, okay, but that seems really unlikely with the rest of the picture as it's emerging. The official insisted that the alliance's position has not changed and Ukraine is still on a path to membership. Well, immediately that should tell you that that official should not be listened to. And the fact that that official is not being named and will not put their name, attach their name to these comments should tell you that it's meaningless. Wow. Okay. RLC in the chat just said, LT from And We Know, that's another very popular podcast in the truther space that I haven't really spent much time listening to or any time listening to, although I hear it's very good. So I just want to make sure, compliments to that guy. People say good things, although I don't know about the content at all. I think he's gone on Eye of the Storm with the guys. So cool. Anyhow, he said he knew JD Vance in the Marines and his goal was politics. So he came home and went to an elite school. Weird. Yes, it is weird. He came home and became part of that Yale thing. Don't know what else to say about that. It used to be something that elite families would do to prepare their elite sons for prominent roles in business, prominent roles at military contractors, prominent roles in politics. They would send their sons to be military officers. They would never be put in a position where they could be harmed. And then they would come home and resume prominent roles in society using military veteran as a credential in the same way that they might use doctor of virology as a credential. So clearly no disrespect to Marines by discussing this, but JD Vance, I mean, come on. Okay, let's continue. So today we woke up to two. Let me see if let me make sure I save this. We woke up to two hard to believe, ridiculous, obviously either totally false flag or regime caused terrorist incidents or, incidents of violence meant to skew the negotiations centered around this Munich Security Conference. So I want to play a little bit of this clip. War Room grabbed it, so you'll see the War Room branding on this clip. Terry America in the chat says LT worked in a media department for the military and Vance apparently worked under him. So that seems like a pretty good take, one that should be taken into account from firsthand knowledge.
Then mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know the situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction?
So the most based and red-pilled things that you can talk about if you don't want to talk about how the world actually is are immigration and censorship. And now I'm clearly not saying that those two things aren't issues. They absolutely are issues. They're just not, well, censorship is a far more important issue. The illegal alien problem can be more easily solved because you can just simply stop the global slave trade and eliminate the cartel's ability to traffic humans around the world on behalf of the global regime. You can cut off their financial sources, whatever else. The censorship thing has distorted people's reality for most of us for our entire lives. So that is a much more serious problem in my mind. But these are the things that you are able to say, oh, you're going to take it to the global regime like that. Okay, fine. So what he's referencing is this incident from CNN today, or it's not from CNN, but this incident in Germany today. At least 20 people are injured after a car drove into a crowd of demonstrators in Munich, Germany, according to police. The incident comes hours before Vice President JD Vance and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are expected in the city for a high-level security conference scheduled to take place on Friday. Munich police say the person who was driving the car has been secured. Now look at this headline, belongings strewn on ground after car drives through crowd in Munich. So we saw, let's watch this video quickly. What is that? Is that anything? I would suggest to you that that's not anything. That's some ambulances and some people wearing uniforms and some trash on the ground. A stretcher's being taken out of the ambulance, and we're just supposed to assume the rest. That's the proof that something terrible happened today. To be clear, we've talked about this stuff a number of times, not suggesting that nothing terrible happened, but we should understand these events right now or by now. And we had one of these events on New Year's Day down in New Orleans. No one talks about it anymore. An illegal alien got a Ford Lightning pickup truck and drove it down a street and killed, I guess, 10 people and injured something like 14. And if people were killed and injured, again, we can have sympathy for those people. We don't have to be fooled and hoodwinked by the story and the presentation. Okay? That night, a New York Post reporter went through the supposed house of this Muslim illegal alien who did that terrorist attack on New Year's Day in New Orleans. And the video was so absurd that no one believed it. It was instantly discrediting to the entire story as a whole. And immediately everyone forgot about the story. That happens with that is a regular enough occurrence that it is to the point where when a story of that structure is propagated, we should immediately understand that's bullshit. But rather than understanding that's bullshit, JD Vance used it to help make one of the points in his speech today. That's very strange. Now, would Donald Trump have done that? Maybe. Because he, like I said, incorporates elements of the central narrative all the time to use them against the enemy. Is JD Vance doing that? Maybe. All right. Got to leave that option open. Very strange, however. Now, in the chat, a couple of people made interesting comments about the LT and JD Vance thing. I would assume then that LT from And We Know has talked about this a number of times. Call sign Cujo says they attended prayer services together and LT liked him. Cool. Deprogrammed to Know says JD Vance supposedly had his plane grounded due to mechanical failure. Same happened with Pence during Trump's first administration. Very interesting. You might also remember, let's check this out. I think that I am right about this. Hold for processing. Kamabla. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. Amazing, isn't it? You can think the story is real if you like. You can think all of this is happening spontaneously in an organic reality. 2023, The Hill, February 18th, so 2 years ago. Harris travels home from Munich on support plane after Air Force Two breaks down. VP Harris had to switch planes on Saturday during her trip home from Europe after technical issues grounded Air Force Two. Harris, who was speaking at the Munich Security Conference, boarded a C-17 support plane to head back to Washington. Due to maintenance difficulties, the VP and the traveling party will depart Munich to D.C. on a backup aircraft, fake Biden administration official, blah, blah, blah. So how about that? Happened to Pence, happened to Kamabla, and now it's happening to JD Vance. Isn't that crazy? Every time the vice president goes over to Munich, there's a plane problem. It's all very real. It's all very, very, very real. Okay, I think that was the end of those interesting comments. Not that the rest of your comments aren't interesting. You know what I mean? So let's get back to the Ukraine and Russia business. So the Munich car terrorist attack was not, and by the way, worth mentioning that every time, and this is kind of a common theme that is that is widespread and maybe viral on Twitter every time something like this happens. The mainstream media always says that car rams through crowd. It's never that a person in a car did it. It's that the car did it. And that's always interesting in a future that involves self-driving automobiles where the car actually would be doing it without personal involvement. So a dynamic to pay attention to. We'll probably see many more times in the future. But that wasn't all. Let's bring it all back around. This is from the New York Times this morning. Russian drone damages radiation shield at Chernobyl, Ukraine says. Ukraine says. Russia's military used a drone with a high explosive warhead to hit the former Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine overnight, damaging the protective shelter that prevents radiation leaks, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine said on Friday. In a post on social media, Mr. Zelensky called the damage significant, but said that there were no signs of increased radiation at the plant, the site of the worst nuclear accident in history. Denis Shmyhal, the Ukrainian prime minister, said Friday morning that emergency crews had extinguished a fire at the site. A Kremlin spokesman denied that Russia had attacked the plant. The structure that was damaged was designed to seal in vast quantities of radioactive isotopes from the fire and meltdown in 1986 at Chernobyl's reactor number 4 and was intended to last generations. So they provide a little map of the power plant. Here's what it was. And this is the big safe confinement zone. Look at this round roof. That little spot right there is where it was damaged. Can't talk. The strike comes as pressure grows on Ukraine and Russia to sit down at the bargaining table 3 years after Moscow launched its full-scale invasion. Again, full scale. It also comes as world leaders are gathered in Munich for an annual security conference where the war in Ukraine and recent statements by President Trump and his team indicating that they want to pursue a quick peace deal will probably dominate conversations. Many attending the Munich conference will remember the radioactive clouds that spread over parts of Europe after the accident at Chernobyl, which happened when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. The accident was initially covered up by Soviet authorities. So blah, blah, blah. Total attack. Very scary. Here is the Associated Press, one of the organizations that funds its propaganda with United States taxpayer money, quote unquote. Money that is printed by the global regime and then stapled to our backs. You have to work for this or die for this. A drone pierced the outer shell of Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear plant. Radiation levels are normal. Oh, thank goodness. Oh no, that little spot. A drone armed with a warhead hit the protective outer shell of Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear power plant on Friday, punching a hole in the structure and briefly starting a fire in an attack Kyiv blamed on Russia. The Kremlin denied it was responsible. Well, of course it was not responsible. Radiation levels at the shuttered plant in Kyiv region, site of the world's worst nuclear accident, have not increased, according to the UN's IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which said the strike did not breach the plant's inner containment shell, so just the outer containment shell. The IAEA did not, a joke almost came to me, and then I was like, this is stupid. Did not attribute blame, saying only that its team stationed at the site heard an explosion and was informed that a drone had struck the shell. Fighting around nuclear power plants has repeatedly raised fears of a nuclear catastrophe during the 3 years of war. particularly in a country where many vividly remember the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, which killed at least 30 people and spewed radioactive fallout over much of the Northern Hemisphere. What? The entire Northern Hemisphere. The Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which is Europe's biggest, has occasionally been hit by drones during the war without causing significant damage. Yes, they've had similar false flag incidents at Zaporozhye to make it sound like Russia was threatening nuclear war or nuclear fallout that might then justify a nuclear response. The strike came 2 days after President Donald Trump upended U.S. policy on Ukraine, saying he would meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss ending the war. The move seemed to identify Putin as the only player that matters and looked set to sideline Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as well as European governments in any peace talks. The hit on Chernobyl occurred as Ukraine is slowly being pushed back by Russia's bigger army along parts of the 1,000-kilometer front line and is desperately seeking more Western help. You got this truck with a snowed gun with a cover over it. You got this man right here, and you got these laser beams highlighting the spot. I wonder if they just burned the hole and there was never a drone attack. That is a conspiracy theory, and I am joking. And fragments of an explosive device are displayed by Ukrainian authorities after a drone attack at the Chernobyl plant on February 14th. Oh, a happy Valentine's Day to them. So they laid out all these little pieces, and then it got snowed on, and that's how you know it's real. You've got these two tiny little men around this big, big hole. Oh, it's huge. Amazing, isn't it? Now, this right here was part of the series I wrote on Substack back in 2022 called A Story About Reality, where I wrote a 25,000-word series on the Q information operation and the emergence of the character Little Q on Truth Social that happened just days before Putin's very brutal invasion. Technically joined February 9th, so that was 2 weeks before Putin's very brutal invasion. And this here was the first post ever by Little Q on Truth Social. How about this? Chernobyl 2026 with a nuclear power plant, that stack or whatever they call that, and the nuclear rings, and as well as the Olympic rings. It says Chernobyl 2026. That is very, very interesting. Now, I have no idea what Little Q could have meant by that. I have no idea whether Little Q is Big Q. But I do know that we've been getting Chernobyl bullshit for years. And Beachside in the chat mentioned that very same post. Asking, did I see, oh, G Money posted that today, did he? Guess where G Money got that? So silly. Did G actually post that? I love G Money, but he would have stolen that from me today. And all good if he did, but I can't see it if he did. So we've had a Chernobyl incident right at the beginning of Putin's very brutal invasion. This is the Wikipedia of today's Chernobyl drone strike. Within hours, there was already a full Wikipedia prepared. Look at this. It's even got the whole central narrative in here, including JD Vance's scheduled meeting at the Munich Security Conference. Isn't that incredible? Hold on. I think that they have the 2022 incident in here as well. But you might remember way back. Oh, no, here it is. The capture of Chernobyl has its own page. 24 February 2022. during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Chernobyl exclusion zone was captured. And so we were being led to believe by the global propaganda media that Russia was potentially going to cause a nuclear disaster at the Chernobyl power plant that has been inactive for nearly 40 years. So Chernobyl 2026, that would be the 40-year anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster of 1986. The only problem with the central narrative around the Chernobyl disaster of 1986 is that it's also a false flag. Now, I'm not saying nothing happened there. Not saying nothing happened there. I'm saying that the central narrative, the official story within the central narrative about Chernobyl was false. And we can know it's false because the only proof that it's not false is that they believe there is a linkage between 5,000 cases of thyroid cancer and the Chernobyl fallout. That's what they've got now. That's the little thread by which the entire Chernobyl story hangs by which the entire story hangs. There we go. And of course, there was an HBO show in 2019 meant to burnish, maybe 2020, meant to burnish the central narrative on Chernobyl. And it was actually an excellent show, highly entertaining, incredibly well done, but propaganda, of course. There has been abundant plant and animal life in the Chernobyl exclusion zone for decades. In fact, it is now one of the lushest wildlife preserves in the world. And if you check out Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it turns out there are just people living there just fine too. It's almost like the whole nuclear fallout was always bullshit. And if the nuclear fallout was bullshit, well then, what of the nuclear weapons? What of the threat of nuclear power? Is it all just bullshit? Yes. Why is it bullshit? Well, because I think that the nuclear thing is coded for other technology, and whether that's related to energy, whether it's related to ether, which is a possibility I explore, whether it is related to an alternate financial system like Bitcoin. Seems like we're going to get that whole nuclear thing. Seems like they're not going to be able to stop it. They keep telling us about all these threats, but are any of them threats? And what does it mean that two of these incidents were prepared for JD Vance's appearance at the Munich Security Conference? JD Vance went on Monday to the AI meeting and warned the world about AI. Well, Donald Trump's already been taking care of that too. The whole point is the regime has its narrative and has its plan. Donald Trump and the people around Trump, well, they have it all. So they know what the regime's plans are going to be. And the only question is whether or not the regime can pitch in a convincing way its version of the story to the world. If it can successfully do that, well, then they win. Because the people, the collective consciousness, will form around the central narrative, and the people will act in accordance with the story they believe, which means that they will help the regime create the reality they desire. And if their story can't sell, well, then people's actions go in a different direction and they create a different reality. And all we go back to is the reality prime when the narrative layer of the false reality breaks down and collapses. Okay? And so we see that playing out. If Donald Trump and the people around him know what the regime's narrative plan is going to be, and that includes elements of the pro-Trump, very based and red-pilled people helping to push the regime narrative forward as loyal, faithful members of the uniparty establishment, well, then Donald Trump will simply go out and preempt those because Donald Trump has the megaphone and MAGA has the giant voice. And so the Trump story and the MAGA story and the America First story is the one that takes hold in the collective consciousness, and the American people then help by virtue of that process of belief formation, they help Trump and MAGA create that corresponding reality. So, of course, when these narrative set pieces are in place, these false flag events meant to make it look like, oh, yes, Russia really is threatening all of Europe. JD Vance, oh, he's very dangerous. He's on that Trump side. Talking about illegal aliens and censorship. Let's see what their meeting ultimately came to today. Oh, by the way, before we do that, let's look at the Russian reaction to this drone event. Okay? Now, this is Russian state media. I don't want anybody to think that this is unbiased media like we have this independent media like CNN and the New York Times. No, this is state media. And by the way, I think pretty much everybody understands now what we've all been saying for years and years, that CNN and the New York Times aren't just leftist media that favors Democrats. They are global regime propaganda media to propagandize us, to mislead us, and then exploit us. And it is funded on the basis of our own work, our own sweat and blood, treasure and toil. So this is TASS, the Russian news agency. Kyiv, to attempt to disrupt Russia-U.S. dialogue with terrorism, says a diplomat. Ukraine will try to disrupt the new dialogue between Russia and the U.S. at the highest level through various forms of terrorism and coercing civilians. Rodion Miroshnik, the Russian Foreign Ministry's special envoy for the Kyiv regime's crimes, wrote on his Telegram channel. The diplomat emphasized that Kyiv reacts hysterically to the start of dialogue between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. leader Donald Trump, launching large-scale drone attacks on Russian regions. Yesterday, 37 Ukrainian drones were downed over the Bryansk region, and today more than 40 over the Belgorod region. Zelensky and the Hawk coalition of partner countries are very displeased with the commenced dialogue. Attempts by Kyiv to disrupt it will occur in various ways, primarily those violating the norms and principles of international law, terrorism, sabotage, and efforts to pressure the civilian population, he noted. On February 12th, Putin and Trump held a telephone conversation. According to the Kremlin, the United States president expressed support for an early ceasefire and a peaceful resolution. The Russian leader, for his part, highlighted the need to address the underlying causes of the conflict and agreed with Trump that lasting peace could be achieved through negotiations, the Russian president press service emphasized. The head of the U.S. administration wrote on Truth Social that Moscow and Washington are immediately initiating negotiations to resolve the Ukrainian conflict. So they don't really need JD. They don't really need the comedic actor. Why? Because Trump's got it under control. JD has no authority to negotiate. He was chaperoned by General Kellogg and by Rick Grinnell, and it looked like Stephen Miller was in one of those meetings. And of course, Marco Rubio was in this meeting right here that JD Vance conducted with Volodymyr Zelensky for apparently all of 30 seconds. I can't imagine this meeting was very long. It looks like they borrowed a conference room at the local Best Western.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're, of course, happy to welcome the Ukrainian delegation led by President Zelensky. We had a number of fruitful conversations, a number of things for us to follow up and work on. And fundamentally, the goal is, as President Trump outlined it, we want the war to come to a close. We want the killing to stop, but we want to achieve a durable, lasting peace, not the kind of peace that's going to have Eastern Europe in conflict just a couple years down the road. So we had a number of good conversations about how we might accomplish that together, and certainly we'll have many more in the days, weeks, and months to come. President Zelensky.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very briefly, I think Vice President said everything absolutely correct. We are very thankful for American support. President Trump, we have good conversation today. Our first meeting, not last, I'm sure, and really what we need to do, speak more, to work more, and to prepare the plan how to stop Putin and finish the war. We want peace very much, but we need real security guarantees, and we will continue our meetings and our work, and we will be very happy to see General Kellogg also in Ukraine in this closest time. Thank you, Vice President, for the meeting. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all.
Mr. Vice President, how does this move
What is
forward if Ukraine is not ready to come to the table with Putin? If Ukraine is not ready to speak with Putin at the table, how do you move forward? Will you still negotiate?
Well, look, I think the way that this conversation moves us forward is, first of all, you have great members of the Ukrainian delegation. You have our incredible Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, here. We have General Kellogg. It's important for us to get together and start to have the conversations that are going to be necessary to bring this thing to a close. That's all I'm going to say for now, because I want to preserve the optionality here from the negotiators and our respective teams to bring this thing to a responsible close. Thank you all. And have
What
a
is
good
the
night.
timeline for this peace deal? Come on, guys. There's no peace deal by summer. It's a failure. Have you come to a deal on critical minerals, rare earth?
Isn't that amazing? It's almost like how things were with the illegitimate Biden administration, where they were just getting all the reporters out of the room as quickly as possible. There is no negotiation happening at the Munich Security Conference. That is a photo shoot. That's a photo shoot. That is a commercial for the legitimacy of what's happening there. Nothing's happening. Donald Trump is negotiating with Vladimir Putin to the extent there's any negotiation. Why would there be any negotiation? Is there something actually to negotiate? Aren't these deals done? The idea that the very brutal invasion has been real the whole time, real as communicated to us by the media. There's something to negotiate here. What is the leverage that Volodymyr Zelensky would use to negotiate? And why is Europe being included on that side? I thought the idea was to protect Ukraine's very sovereign borders, and that Volodymyr Zelensky is the real president of Ukraine. What does Europe have to do with any of this? What does the Republican establishment have to do with it? What does the Uniparty have to do with it? What does NATO have to do with it? What does the European Union have to do with it? Nothing. Nothing. There's no power left there. It's a joke. I don't know what JD's representing, but it's not U.S. foreign policy. We're told that Donald Trump is disrupting U.S. foreign policy by the media. It's all getting a little strange, don't you think? I'm going to do one more ad before we wrap up. I'm, of course, a big fan of Truth Social. I'm only on Truth Social and Telegram. I left X.com. Donald Trump says Truth Social is the real voice of America. So if you are looking for a great place online for news, discussion, and entertainment, then check out Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media website. You'll get breaking news, stories, and commentary from top media figures. If you want to see Trump's legendary Truth Social posts, then get on Truth Social today. Join a growing community of patriots and on a free speech platform designed to avoid censorship and cancellation by big tech. Make your voices heard. Join the movement. Join Truth Social. And if you do, you can go ahead and follow me at I'm Your Moderator. That and Telegram are where I put out all of my commentary and where I post all the links that I go through on the show. So occasionally people will ask if I have show notes as far as the links and sources go. I don't do that because that would be such a monumental lift, as I do this show totally on my own. But those links will appear on the Telegram info feed and many of them on Truth Social. T.me/veryreasonable. And you can find me on Truth Social. I'm your moderator. And I'm just going to take one last look at the chat before I get out of here. I will see many of you tomorrow night for the Devolution Power Hour. And if you are not familiar with Badlands Media, you should get familiar with Badlands Media because we work our asses off. And John Harold is a brilliant guy, a funny guy, works very hard, and he's become a very good friend of mine, and he takes way too much shit. So if you don't often visit Badlands Media, I hope you will. Come check us out. We start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday evenings, right here on Rumble, Badlands Media. We got some Rumble rants to get to before we get out of here. KL is me, $50. Thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts. And thank you for your money. Thank you for your support. I really do appreciate it. Where else are we down this list? Wenfrick, $20. Thank you, Chris. You are fabulous. You are fabulous, Wenfrick. And I feel like that's probably Wendy. I hope that's what it is. Otherwise, I'm just messing it all up. Danny Girl, NJ, $10. Funny in the most ironic way. My son ran out late last night for a bag of hot Cheetos so he could taste them one last time before RFK Jr. bans the red 40 dye. Like me and ice cream before a new diet. I feel that. No doubt about it. I thought I saw one more in here that I do not want to miss, but perhaps I did not. So that's it. And with that, I will be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
Ah!
And what's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
You down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelculture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.